Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here for our board retreat. Um, we are minus one board member who's at a graduation, but we are very glad that we're here and you're here to join us. We're holding our retreat this morning here at One Main Place, and welcome to my colleagues. They're getting settled in with coffee, goodies. And I want to welcome staff. Very happy staff. I love happy staff. No. So as I kick this off, I want to see our good morning to council and general manager, if you have some opening words for us.
Yeah, thanks, President Lewis. Good morning, board. Good to see you here, and as staff and also the public. I think we got a couple of members from the public. Just thank you all for being here this morning. So before we get started, I'd like to bring up Andrew Wilson to provide us with the safety moment.
Thanks, Sam. As you guys know, we do safety first here at TriMet, so we're going to start our board meeting with a safety moment. Hopefully, safety moments become more and more routine, and so we're going to do ours in a little bit of a quiz style this morning, so be sharp. So first of all, I just want to point out that our CPR certified folks in the room, can you raise your hands? We've even got a few board members. So we've got plenty of people to come to your aid if that happens. Also want to point out that one person to call 911 should we have an emergency. Can I get a volunteer to do that? All right, Tommy Hunt in the back will do that for us. Thank you. Okay, quiz style. Where is the AED and the first aid kit in this room? Yeah, Tyler, I'm going to give that to Tyler with your, but it's right there on the other side. Roberta's pointing. So that's where that is. We all know where that is in the room. Now, we have an evac route. The stairs are just behind me on this wall. Where are we going to go and stage following an emergency if we have to evacuate? Oh, I want to give it to you, but I also want to give it to Anessa. But I'm going to go with the board member, Anessa. You know what I mean? So, well, hey, see the nexus? Yep. So we're going to go to 2nd and Main, the Starbucks, and we're all going to follow Anessa. So anyway, we have a little fun with that, but I just want to make sure we're all getting the routine now, and that's how this should be, and that's why we start with this. This morning, I'm going to kind of transition to a real additional safety moment. Do you all know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month? So we've done this safety moment at the executive team several times, but I'm going to do this here as well because it's really important that we all take responsibility for our own mental health and the mental health of our loved ones and those that we know. So here's how we can be educated on that. I want to give you a couple quick figures. These are from 2025 and 2026. 83% of workers suffer from work-related stress, and 54% says it affects their home life. That's a bad statistic, so we want to be a part of supporting others. Another statistic, an estimated 120,000 people last year died annually from stress-related events. So something for us to be knowledgeable of and be able to diagnose in others. A couple things to recognize in terms of recognizing mental health issues, withdrawal behavior, agitation, and reckless behavior in others are things that could be signs of a mental health issue that needs to be addressed. One of the things that I read about today was how are you really does matter. So check in on people if you see this. That actually having a peer or a loved one check in with you really means something. And we need to destigmatize folks that need to go out and seek mental health. And we can all be a part of that by encouraging resources and encouraging others to take care of themselves. Lastly, I'll just leave this with you, another quiz. What is the mental health suicide hotline, the number? Anybody know it? Mary knows it. All right, 988. So just remember that, 988, it's staffed all the time. You could call for yourself or someone else. So that's your brief safety moment for May.
Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate that. 988 is that number. So I want to start by recognizing the time and the intention that each one of you as board members you're bringing to this retreat. These moments as we step back and really just have a moment to really talk with each other from the regular board meetings are critical, and it's going to give us space to think more strategically, provide more opportunity for you as a board to really talk with each other informally. As Director Kellogg had noted at our last board retreat, and these moments also help align us in the path ahead as we move forward. Today is about clarity, though, clarity and direction. We are really facing real challenges, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, is the financial pressures that we're faced with, the rising cost inflation that's there, and then the difficult decisions about service and about priorities. At the same time, we also have meaningful opportunities in front of us. We have new revenue pathways that we need to explore, innovation like hydrogen that we're moving forward with, and then a chance to really shape the future of transit in this region in a way that really meets the moment as we move forward. So the value of this group in the diversity of perspectives and the willingness to engage directly with tough issues. So I just, again, thank you for being here and for your continued leadership that you're bringing. So I'll yield back to you, President Lewis.
Thank you, Sam. You took a lot of words out of my mouth this morning. So as the board looks through some of the items on our agenda this morning, come with an open mind to look at tough topics that we want to talk about. Oh, mic's going in and out today. And you did receive handouts this morning. I know that you did not get them ahead of time, but they're there. And so we're going to start off with, if this comes from our vice president, of how we open our retreat, because it sets the tone. And so at the bottom, on the second page of the retreat, are 4 thoughtful questions for you. And instead of 1, I did add more time so everyone can come with or choose 1 or even 2 if you like, no rules. Give it some thought and then go ahead and share. So we'll go alphabetically. Oh, you're gonna make it Let's go first name. Okay. Share which 2 that you want to just give a heart to, and we have JT. Oh, okay.
Let's see here. I'm just reading through these questions.
Okay.
Okay, I will go with, let's just go with number 1 and number 2. One
Okay.
thing we're hopeful about for TriMet over the next year, I'm hopeful about balancing out our revenue portfolio and devising a political strategy that makes the operational pinch that we are in as an agency a solvable problem rather than a crisis that we have to respond to internally by gutting our system. The second, let me not go with priority, you believe. Let me say, in one word, how are you arriving today and why? I'm showing up today with optimism.
That word's taken.
Oh, okay.
It's taken.
I was gonna say, no, I feel very, very hopeful about where we're at, and that's not to say that we're not in incredibly challenging times, but it is to say that I do think there's a path forward if we're willing to work with everyday folks to find the path and put one foot in front of the other. I think it will involve us incurring risk, but I feel hopeful that we can get there, so.
Okay, we
That's
have
enough.
hopeful. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, you said optimism. so
You said
hopeful is
Hopeful's still on the board if you want it.
okay.
Hopeful was the framing.
I'm just going to wing it.
Okay,
All right.
we love winging.
So what's one thing you're hopeful for TriMet over the next year? Not just TriMet, but the entire world. Can we please get a containment on costs, right? The inflation is out of control, and the ability for inflation to rise absolutely defeats our ability to raise revenue at the same pace, right? No matter what we talk about today, right? So that's one thing I'm very hopeful for. All right, second, what's that?
No, just, is that a grounded hope, or are we wishing on stars? Sorry, yeah, I didn't mean it.
You can address that in your commentary.
All right.
So in the past few months, what's one moment that reminded you why this work matters? So while we were talking about redoing the route for the 96, Tom and his team were kind enough to run a test bus on the new route and advertise that to the regular riders to say, let's give you some comfort by doing a test run of the new bus, the new route, and things went smoothly. You know, it was a little longer as expected, but I'll never forget, one of the riders on the bus specifically rode that bus because she wanted to talk to people from TriMet. And she had great comments and then told us that her mother and father met on the 96 bus. And that she was continuing their legacy by riding it. So it just really furthered the fact that this isn't just about trains and buses and things, but it's about, you know, human connections and, you know, the good that we're doing out there. So
Very
follow
good.
that frisbee.
Ah, look, okay, you're up.
Yeah, alphabetically, it was,
So who's,
Thomas.
That's true. If you want, yeah.
yeah.
okay.
When Dr. Luce and I were initially talking about this, I was thinking like fall, Starbucks, cup of coffee, everyone's dressed down casually, and then we get to just talk about TriMet, you know, ignoring the fact that we're still being, you know, still a public meeting, still, you know, people watching us talk. And when I imagined that, that was the place where we get to be more frank, direct, and let more out, right? As if you're having a discussion with your friends about what you're passionate about, i.e. TriMet. So then, you know, what are some questions? And then Dr. Luce came up with his wonderful questions. But essentially, it was to just get stuff out, like what's sort of in our minds. For me, number 3, one moment reminded me, the service adjustments we had to do. And then 2 is tied to that is the sustainable financial path. That's the priority that deserves all of our attention. And I think we all know, I'm just regurgitating what we already know. This is not business as usual. And I think we get to scrutinize every single action, including spending, every resolution, more so than, you know, we were probably expected to and during one of those good years. So I sort of have that sense where, okay, I need to sort of, you know, put on another lens here as I think about the fiduciary duties, as well as we were willing to make that kind of drastic cuts. Am I willing to sort of channel that same amount of willingness in all other areas? So I think about that. I mean, it could be capital expenditure, it could be anything. So that's what's on my mind. I think all ideas are game. I also think about the wonderful, compelling comments provided by, you know, Director Flowers last meeting, strategy. And last meeting it was apparent to me that, man, we have different sense of timing, right? When we're willing to, you know, draw the line. Like, we have different sense of that. And it's good to talk about that and also support holding that line in all aspects. So those are some things that are on my mind. Thank you.
Good morning. I think that I am showing up today feeling resolute. I don't know that I feel hopeful. I think there is a path forward for us. It is really hard. It requires thoughtful, strategic work. It requires the full focus of the agency. It requires investment in ways that we haven't invested and in places that we haven't invested before, and it involves cuts in places that we have historically invested. And it involves thinking about our work differently, thinking about our writers differently. Frankly, I think it involves rebuilding most of our political relationships. And it is really hard. I have done somewhat similar things unsuccessfully, the 2020 transportation measure, and it remains the hardest thing that I have done, and we were not successful. So, I don't know, I'm doing 2 and 4. And so I feel, but we also don't have a choice. And I believe that we can do it. But I think that we have to, this is a really intense moment. And I say we, and that's not just the board, that is the whole TriMet team. And so I feel focused and determined, but I also think we need to really support our staff in this work because this is really hard. And it's gonna be harder. It's gonna be more than we've ever done. So, I will say in the past few months, what's one moment that reminded you why this work matters? And I should have texted you, but then my kid threw up sand all over me. But I was at the beach this weekend and at Pacific City and waiting in line for the restroom before said child threw up everywhere. And I heard 2 gentlemen walk by, and I am a total eavesdropper, so never have an important conversation near me. And, yeah, just to put it out there. They were talking about their commutes and what they were going to do. They rode the 96 together and what their options were with the 96 changing. And they were being really, I heard a little bit of like, well, my wife's kind of happy because now the grocery store is on my way home from work on this new stop. And then I heard a little bit, I think I might drive to the other park and ride and take this other route in. So there was some real creativity. And I also heard a little bit like, I might end up driving a little bit more. So, it is a mixed bag, but it was such a moment of a deep reminder of how much this work matters to people and their everyday lives, that they're out there on a Sunday at the beach in the sunshine, talking about what their life looks like with the different 96. And so that was a moment that really was both lovely and sad in all of the ways that I think are important when we ground ourselves in the folks who are riding and using the bus and the MAX now, and the folks who would like to be riding and using the MAX in the future.
That's okay. Yeah, thank you. Very good. Wow. I guess I'm last. One word, I'm going to do 4. In one word, how am I arriving today? Listening. That came about 2 in the morning as I'm trying to, you got to go to sleep. No, you're worrying about what you're going to say for your word. And it's listening to opinions that I may not agree with, opinions that I agree with, opinions that I should give more thought to, and relearning maybe, in and out. There. I need duct tape and a hammer. Okay. That usually makes it work. Listening to new people that I have not heard from, and then listening to words of reason, words of why we do the work that we do. So I'm showing up to listen. Let's see, and then one thing that I'm hopeful about for TriMet for the next year, looking forward to rounding out our board. We, do have, waiting for the arrival of a person at some time, finishing up our board. And then looking forward to our next year, more, not more retreats, but more robust retreats. And looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and doing all the work that we have shared this morning. We have, to my knowledge, we have not been down this path before. Right, okay. It's going to be hard. And so hopefully we do it together as a team. All right. Good, all right. I'm listening. All right, let's move.
I'm going to switch out your mic.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Got a new voice. All right, so we're going to move on to recap of our last board retreat. We had, I know David and Robert, sorry if I'm not giving their last names, but we had David, oh, maybe it's in my notes. No, yeah, David and Robert. And Shelley is going to walk through, we did sign the 2 documents of our communication and protocol. She'll walk through that. And then I have a few comments on our safety protocol and public testimony. I'm going to turn it over to Shelley.
Thank you, Laverne. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to keep us on schedule, by keeping this very short, but just as a reminder, what came out of the last retreat was the board had asked for a couple of one-pagers around communication protocols, specifically communications with the GM from the board and staff, and also communications with constituents, like when you get emails from the public with comments, what to do. So over the holidays, Sarah Ewing and I worked on those one-pagers, and then we discussed them and got feedback from all of you through the board education sessions, and then after that, when we were finalizing them. So to condense them all down really into the central core of what they are is really just always consult or communicate with the general manager about everything. Meaning, if you get an email from a constituent, you're not sure what to do with it, you can rest assured that we can help you. And if you use the general manager's office as a clearinghouse to do that, you can't go wrong. Meaning, he's got a whole bunch of experience in discerning who's the best person within the agency to research the issue that the constituent has raised and determine how to respond. It might be a response directly from the board member. Far more often, it's a response from the general manager or staff. So that's that piece. And then when you're communicating with staff at TriMet, always include the general manager, unless there are a couple of exceptions in the one-pagers, unless it's a legal matter or it's regarding the general manager's conduct, in which case consult with me or the board chair. So these have now been finalized per your instructions, and they will be in the board portal for you to refer to. We're also including them in the new board orientation packet. And so our new board member, when we get them, will also be given these to use. So there you go.
Thank you, Shelley. I do have one piece to add to that, and take it as humor, or, my word of the day was listen. When you are communicating with TriMet staff and you copy Sam, copy me as well. I don't want Sam calling me in the middle of the night of email he got from you. I'd like to know ahead of time or when Sam gets the email. So just copy me so I can stay in the mix as opposed to playing catch up. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, just real
Robert.
quick, for the good of the order, one of the other things we discussed at the last retreat was the public meetings law and how we communicate, and I know there's been some developments, so can you give us that 30 seconds on that?
Yes.
You bet. We were waiting to see whether or not that bill that was in the legislature was going to be signed by Governor Kotek, and she vetoed it. So, and that just happened in the last month. And so, yes, now we're going to re-look at, well, what's the existing law, which that was part of why that bill was there, was in the hopes that it was going to give us a little bit more clarity about what you guys can do communicating with each other outside of formal board meetings. So let me get back to you now that we've got that direction of the governor vetoing that current bill, which I had already got a whole email all drafted that I was going to share with you guys, and then I wasn't sharing it with you, so.
Okay, and not to add more to your plate, but there were also two decisions about activities within the Portland City Council and how those were not violating, so the public meetings law.
Yes.
Albeit shockingly.
Yes.
But if you could address that too, I
I
think
will.
that'd be, give us more context. Thank you.
That would be good for our next education session. I was going to add what Robert said on the decision with city council, and, because I'd love to have a retreat, you know. No, just, okay. Any other comments from anyone? Okay. Next piece is, I do have a couple, just to ask the board, we did change our security. We do have safety and security coming up, giving us a briefing. We've moved the table for people signing up downstairs to the lobby. So I was curious if you had any of you, because you have different constituents, different places that you are, have you heard any feedback from anyone that they don't like it, it's working? I noticed they come up with numbers. There's not the backlog at the door. Yes.
No, I have not heard any feedback, but I personally like this. Less clutter here. So once folks come up here, we can focus on the meeting or meeting that is to happen. So I think it's great.
Okay. Any other thoughts? One thing, and I'm kind of like Tyler, I listen to eavesdropping. And so, well, I overhear, not eavesdropping, that's the wrong word.
Just being observant.
Observant, yes. Okay. So Robert had mentioned when we're having public testimony to have a variety in the times, and you had noted evening. So just to put that back in the general managers, so next time, or JC, next time, and it can be virtual, but an evening, because you had noted you had feedback for those who work in the daytime, can't fake it, you know, while they're sitting there and listening to testimony and still want to. But I think all the places that we do testimony, that the evening was not covered. Was there another one that you heard? You want to comment?
Well, no, and, you know, when we have big initiatives, we go
Right.
around and we do meetings, but just as a consideration, maybe once or twice a year, move the board meeting to a, you know, late afternoon, early evening kind of thing. And everyone's schedule, you know, is gonna be yes or no, but just to give people more opportunity to get in front of some more, you know, diverse group of people.
I'll second that 100%. Yeah, I think it's something I've heard pretty consistently
Good,
from
okay.
constituents, in person, online, and in other forums, expressing, hey, I would love to be able to participate and give direct input on my thoughts, but I have a job and I can't get time off to come pop up on you guys downtown. So to the extent that we could, at the very least, move a couple meetings to be situated in the evenings, I think that would do a lot for our ability to meaningfully engage with the people who rely on our system.
Oh, good. I'm glad I brought it up. Was that the first time we just had testimony only? Remember when we came? Was that the first time we had ever? Yes, JC is saying yes. So, and it worked really well. There was no board meetings. We just listened to testimony. Yes, Tyler.
On that note, not necessarily relevant to the time of an event, but the feedback that I got from several people is that they were like, well, I already showed up at the public meeting and gave my feedback. Do I also need to show up at the board meeting? And that actually having the multiple board meetings where we were soliciting comment made them feel like their comment and feedback that they delivered at the public meeting, where they had more time and more interactive ways to engage, was actually discounted. Because they were like, well, if I want that to count, I really need to show up and present it to the board. And so I'm actually wary, particularly in situations where the board is like, I think we all did a good job of saying, we're setting policy around how we make these service cuts, but we're not mucking around and like we're not drawing our own maps. That I would want us to be careful about the way that we set up board comment so that it does not in any way undermine the public comment events that we have where people get to engage, I think in ways that are, because our team does a good job, a bit more substantive. So that is something that I would like us to think about.
Okay. Was it because we didn't do a board meeting along with the testimony, or it was just,
No, because
Yeah.
no, it was because we had the testimony, but they were just like, do I have to show up to the testimony event? I already showed up to the public meeting. Like, why are you having both of these? And the answer was, well, we want to give people a chance to talk to the board. And they're like, well, does my feedback really, like, if
Oh, okay,
does it
'cause
count more if
got
I
it.
give it to the board than if I give it at the public meeting? And I said, absolutely not. I actually think it is more valuable to give it at the public comment opportunity than it is to come give it to the board. And so I just think we need to be clear, and I get a little bit anxious when our solution is like more board testimony, because I think it might undermine some of the public events that we have that are out in the community where we're really set up to support people better.
okay, that makes sense. I'm just trying to see, because it was our first time that we'd ever, and so it was new, and so I guess we could say it was a beta test.
Yeah.
And so we could fine tune that, yeah.
Can I just add one caveat to that? You know, I do agree that substantive feedback to staff is important. I also think it's really important for us to have opportunities to engage directly with the people who rely on our system in the context of these board meetings. We have varying degrees of everyday contact with folks in our districts, right? Some of us have jobs that allow us to be out in community every day, some of us don't. So I do think it's important for us to be getting feedback in both of those forums, on the staff side and on the board side, to the extent that that doesn't overburden people who, to Tyler's point, have limited time on their hands to be able to provide feedback to us.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anything, okay. Thank you for that, for the emergency part. Okay, so we will move to our first presentation, and it's about the hydrogen fuel cell. This came up at our last board meeting, and there had been some updates and changes, but first I'm going to ask Sam for a few opening words, and then we'll move to the presentation.
First, thanks, President Lewis and the board. We have made significant progress here in our efforts to bring zero-emission buses that uses hydrogen to 82nd Avenue. And I just really want to congratulate the team, the entire TriMet team, with Alan Leto kind of in the lead here, with actually doing that. So with that, why don't you give us a quick update?
Great, thank you, Sam. Director Lewis, President Lewis, and directors. Very brief update, and I do have a presentation if that can be brought up. But there we go. So as Sam said, we've made some real progress on fuel cell electric buses using hydrogen. Next slide. And a reminder that sort of the environment we're working in, we have made a lot of progress using renewable electricity and renewable diesel. So we have substantially brought down our greenhouse gas emissions. And that includes about 35% of the ridership on our system being on max, which is 100% electric. So we've made a lot of progress. There's still some to do. Hydrogen is one way for us to be able to do that. Next slide. And the buses are essentially, think of it as a battery electric bus with way fewer batteries, a hydrogen fuel cell, and some hydrogen tanks on it so that it can recharge itself as it drives. That gives it longer range than a battery electric bus is still capable of even today, especially in colder weather. And this allows us to meet some of the same expectations in range and performance that we're able to get out of our diesel fleet. Next slide. And a reminder that for the 82nd Avenue project specifically, the funding sources included the expectation of hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. We have a FTA grant that is specifically focused on just that. Otherwise, you know, if we had complete control over this, we might be considering something simpler and not something new that stretches our abilities. But we have this great opportunity. We have the conversations we've had with the public and the expectation in the funding stream. And so an opportunity here and an opportunity that is externally funded, not something that is drawing away from other TriMet resources. Next slide. The update is that we will be bringing two items to the board at the May board meeting. One is for the contract for hydrogen supply, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but that is about 2 years of testing, commissioning, and training on the buses, and then about 3 years of actual operations on the 82nd FX project. And then we will also be bringing the contract for 15 fuel cell electric buses. Next. Just briefly on the supply, because that is the issue in the Pacific Northwest. There is supply in Southern California, there is supply in other parts of the country. The Pacific Northwest is still growing its industry. And we had some details that needed to be shored up before we brought the item to the board. The main bidder worked on their partnership and identified actually a stronger partner than what they first came in with, and were able to identify a source that's about the same distance away, but is much closer to production. They will be in production very soon. The source is in Arlington, Oregon, which is just up I-84, this side of Boardman, and it is a waste-to-gas project. So they are using it to produce a range of gases, including hydrogen, which we can use. They'll be producing plenty of hydrogen for our use and for other uses in the timescale of months, not in years. So we have a lot more confidence in this supply and their ability to get it to us. They have the opportunity to bring it up from Pittsburgh, California, which was another site that is already in production or is about to be in production. But what looks like a great partnership, and we met with the CEOs of both of the companies a few weeks ago and had a really, really productive conversation that answered basically all of our questions. So feeling a lot of confidence in bringing this to you in just a few weeks. Last slide, I think. So just a basic schedule reminder, you did approve the hydrogen infrastructure design, which just helped us move forward on some of the details of design so as to not hold back the project as a whole. We'll be bringing both the supply and the bus contracts to you in a couple of weeks. Assuming that all goes ahead, then we would be putting in the order for the bus, the pilot bus, which is every set of buses is a little bit different. It's not like they just roll off the lot and they can go straight to a transit agency. They have to do some configuration to meet our expectations and to be compatible with the rest of our systems. So the pilot bus we would get in sort of the fall, later part of sorry, not in the fall, but in the later part of FY27, which means in the spring of 27. That one we will test and kind of kick around and see if we can break it and do everything we can to understand exactly what's going on with it. When that passes the test, then we go ahead and order the rest of the 14. And we would be expecting all of those to be on site in 2028 in preparation for 2029 service. And that's all I have to bring. There will be obviously a bit more detail in the board memos in a couple of weeks, but happy to answer questions.
Okay, I see Tyler. And
Thanks,
then
Ellen.
Robert.
That's really exciting news about Intech, because I had heard some concerns around timing from our partners further, or potential partners further north. And I guess my question is around that. My understanding is the transport costs of hydrogen are very high. And so if we go with our backup in Pittsburgh, California, how are we protecting ourselves from cost?
The way the contract works, it is based on timing. So there is a certain price upfront with the expectation that they might have to truck it farther. The price drops significantly to a much lower level by the time we get to where we're actually in service and using a much larger amount. So they are, expecting to be able to get it from Arlington, but they're committing to a price
Okay,
regardless of the exact location.
got it. And that's higher at first when we're testing it, and then when we're actually, great,
That's correct.
that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So just follow up on Tyler's question, the price of the fuel's fixed that we're purchasing?
But yes, it's a 5-year contract. And it is higher at the beginning and then comes down over time with the expectation, like I said, that they are being able to get it from a closer location.
So it's not a spot price?
That's correct. Yeah, there are many ways we could have done this, but it appears that the sources of hydrogen are relatively few and far between in the Pacific Northwest. We don't want to truck it up from Southern California where it is more abundant because of the price. And therefore, locking in that supply also meant locking in the price, but that allows us some comfort from not having it bounce up and down.
Okay. So I'm going to have a series of questions. I don't want answers. I just want to preview them for the next board meeting, and I'd like to hear about them at that time. First, is this technology 100% reliable, right? Today, we can put R99 or whatever it is in a bus, and we know it's going to go. Is this the same that when we get them, I know we're going to test one, but we're confident that we're going to be able to make it work over those couple of years, right? And if we're not, then what happens? Are we still committed to buying 14 of these things that may or may not work? Second, for the FTA grant that you talked about, the big chunk of funding there, is that hydrogen only, or is what we're doing now with the R99, I'm just going to call it, does that qualify for the grant as well? And my last question is really focused, I guess, on this supply issue a little bit more, is what happens if the contractor can't provide the supply, right? If they just go default because of technical problems or whatever else, then what's our backup source? Do we have a backup to the backup? And then what's the cost on that look like? So again, all of this is from today's theme of revenue, right? And revenue is not just what you bring in the door, but it's also controlling what goes out the door. And so those are the questions.
Happy to bring those answers back in 2 weeks. The really simple one to answer is the federal low-no grant is specific to hydrogen.
Great. Thank you.
Thomas and then JT.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very exciting. I probably, like a lot of people, it's newer and shiny, so it's more fun to think about. With that said, I think consistent with my earlier comment, right? We have another opportunity when we are about to make big investments. I mean, we already sort of committed the design portion last month, so we've been at it. So I'm not saying we should pump the brakes or anything like that. But we have another opportunity to slow down and re-examine each step of the way, especially for bigger capital expenditure type of big spends. And this isn't as significant as building a new light rail, but I think next meeting I would like to be reminded about the TriMet portion of the 64 million, the breakdown of that, and the aftermath after about 5 years, right? The likelihood, to the extent that that's known to us, about any additional funding source for this technology that is still going to be relatively new in 5 years after we exhaust this 346 million. I'm not, certainly I won't be sitting here in 5 years, but I would hate for a future board to look back and say, why did they commit so much money on this thing that, was going to run out in 5, maybe up to 10. And so that's just the framework I'm coming from. So I guess the project cost estimate, I'm sorry, now it wouldn't be a project anymore in 5 years. It would be sort of operation cost compared to the other available, mediums we have in 5 years, and what that could look like. Because we have a primary goal of providing a wonderful mobility solution for folks. And then the secondary goal I see as TriMet being this cool leader, not just in the city of Portland, but as we know, nationally. And so this definitely hits all the boxes on the secondary goals. And who knows, we might win another award from this. But when we think about, what we had to do this past year, could a pivot here, or could we help ourselves avoid or reduce the extent of any additional changes that we have to make in future years? So those are some angles that I'm coming from. Thank you very much.
I'm curious if you want me to try to respond to any of that, or?
Oh, no, not at this
Okay.
time. Yeah, similar to Director Kellogg. Thank you.
Okay. JT?
Oh, yeah, I just want to second what Director Kim just said. I'm really, really, really interested in the fungibility of the dollars within this broader capital stack. I'd be interested in learning more about that now. I think it's directly relevant to the conversation we're getting ready to have about revenue. And I think you said it so perfectly, Director Kim. Yeah, we may very well win an award for this project, but if we're actively cutting service that people rely on in the process of winning the award, where are we placing our priorities? And I love the way that you phrased number one and number two there. I'm interested in how we're prioritizing number one within the context of this project, which y'all know I care about deeply and have tried to go to the map for in many different respects. But yeah, could you speak a little bit more, Alan, about the fungibility of the dollars within this broader capital stack? If there are buckets within this stack that could be operationalized to help stabilize other elements of our agency, particularly service?
Alan, before you do that, I think it's also worth reminding the board that TriMet made a promise to the governor and community groups and environmental organizations throughout the state and throughout Portland that we would not buy any more diesel buses after 2030. And so this is, and that was a toughly negotiated commitment. And so I will say I am not interested in reneging on that commitment without essentially approval from all those organizations who we promised would do this. And so that is I think that's a really important thing for us to remember, because we cannot, the work we have in front of us raising money requires making long-term promises to partners. And if we prove that we don't hold true to those commitments, we are not in a good place for the promises and commitments we need to make going forward.
Okay. Can I say at this time, I don't think JT was asking to pivot, but more definition on the buckets that he have. Are you prepared today, or do you need more time to walk through all the dollars, or should we move that?
I could give you a high-level answer at this point and then see if you want follow-up in a couple of weeks.
Let's do both, a
Okay.
high level and then do more detail.
Okay, so
Okay, 'cause
sorry.
No,
The high level is, we asked ourselves the same question. And the simple answer is, basically, everything you see in that list is specifically focused on this project on 82nd Avenue for capital. There's not a lot of fungibility to any other uses, even to the point of, other technologies, such as battery electric bus, we would actually lose some of that funding. So if the question is, were it, fungible to support other services, those kinds of things, that it really isn't. It's available for this use or it's not available.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I thought, yeah, I kind of, yeah. And Sam, you had one or two comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to support the comment that Director Frisbee made earlier, that part of the HB 2017 funding that we receive now, there was a commitment made that there will be that we would move directly into zero emission buses and no diesel buses moving forward. So we have a plan now, that's the 2040 plan that we're trying to move towards as well.
Yeah, and that's not lost on me. I just do think we made that commitment in a much different climate. And to Director Kim's point, and let me not bastardize it, but if I had to choose between keeping people riding transit and buying a new fleet of buses that meet that commitment, I would choose keeping people on buses 7 days out of a week, 365 days a year. So that could be a personal difference in opinion.
No,
But
that's good.
that's where I stand.
Right. I think it's important for each presentation that comes up that brings dollars with it, that Director Kim, Director JT do ask, can those dollars? Director Flowers was not here back when the note that Director Frisbee made was not knowledgeable at that time. I just learned of it when I came on, probably year 3. So sometime, we may have a new board member that is totally unaware and may ask the same questions. But I think for today, our focus is on revenue and questioning and asking whether restricted dollars can be moved is a good question to ask so that we are aware. And I think that's important, but I don't want to throw any cold water on Director Kim or JT in asking the question, yeah. But it would be helpful, next board meeting, a little bit more detail. Okay. Good?
Yeah,
All right, okay.
well, again, we're going to
Sure.
get off track here, but.
That's okay.
With respect to Director Frisbee and Kim, when we made this promise for HB 2017, I presume it was premised on the fact that this technology was going to be available and affordable, right? Okay, and so I'm excited to hear at the next meeting whether it is or is not,
Okay.
both of those things.
I'll take it a little further. This is second or third time Director Frisbee has brought up that agreement, the players. Is there any documentation that the board can educate themselves on from then?
Yes, the board passed a resolution back in 2018.
2018?
And I can make
Okay.
that available to the board.
Okay, okay. Good? Okay.
But
Go
one more
ahead.
comment I'll share is that even if we were to lose some funding that's on the list here, by not committing to this hydrogen project, I think if we would be more resilient 5, 10 years down the road as an agency without the hydrogen component, I think that should at least be considered. And I also think about the unspoken promise that we've made to our riders about the sustainability of their routes. That last month, unfortunately, we had to pivot. And so we have made a lot of promises, and we still do make a lot of promises, but I think it would be a matter of prioritizing which promises we keep first. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Keep going, guys. All right. Next on our agenda, we'll be talking about our authority for revenue generation. This topic came from various board members on what can we do? So before we even talk about all the avenues and pathways to revenue, what power does the board have? And I don't recall we've ever had this conversation. So this is a time, take notes of what we can, and I find the presentation from our council will be very educational.
Thank you, Laverne. Good morning again, everybody. TriMet currently generates revenue in 4 major ways. And I define the term major as those buckets of funding that materially contribute to TriMet's financial health and stability. I also call them the Fab Four. So they include grants, so things like our federal formula funds, taxing, bonding, and fares. All of those powers to generate revenue are included and granted to us by the Oregon legislature. So under state law, which is codified, as you know, in Chapter 267, which we also refer to as our enabling statutes. Enabling as in they define both the power and the limitations in combination with the Oregon Constitution on what we as an agency can currently do to generate revenue. So those statutes, which have been in effect for over 50 years now, have been amended frequently over those 50 years and can be. However, with the recognition, I think, by everybody that that does take a concerted effort, it takes time in order to make amendments to the statutes. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. We'll start with bonding, which is a form of borrowing. It's a form of borrowing that is secured, right? It's secured by something underlying it of value. And I know that everyone around this table is very familiar with the first type of bonding, which is revenue bonds, because as your first official order of business in 2026, at your January board meeting, you granted TriMet the authority via resolution to go out to the bond market and secure $150 million in bonding. And as security for that bond issuance, we are pledging our employer payroll tax revenues in order to secure that. We are deep in the process of that due diligence and issuing those bonds. That's coming up in just a couple of weeks. And we're actually very excited. We got our first, I'm sure you'll hear from Nancy, we got our first AAA rating after the rating agency calls last week. Anyways, prior to this issuance, the last time we went out for a bond like this was in 2021. But prior to that, we have done it many times at this agency to fund the Orange Line, to fund FX Division, you know, Better Red, a whole bunch of projects. And those examples, including purchases of vehicles, those examples show you the limitation on revenue bonding, which is that it is limited to using those proceeds for capital costs. Capital costs are defined as the construction or acquisition of a major capital asset with a useful life of at least 1 year. So these types of proceeds cannot be used for maintenance or operations costs. Next slide, please. Yes. I think Nancy will be able to answer that, but I think after this bond issuance, we're going to be somewhere around 6%. Oh, 7.3. And as you know, our debt ceiling is 7.5, so we'll be under it. Thank you. The next slide, yes, bonding, again, we have a different type of statutory authority in our enabling statutes, and this is for a general obligation, or more commonly called a GO bond. You are obviously very familiar with these. You've seen them from many of our local jurisdictions recently to build libraries, schools, sewer systems, parks. And so we have had a number of jurisdictions that have done that. Those do require voter approval before we can pledge property taxes as of the security for bonding going out to the bond market. Those property taxes would be limited by the Oregon Constitution in certain respects. One of the main respects, of course, is if approved by the voters, you can only charge up to $10 per $1,000 of assessed real market value. And so that's an inherent limitation in this type of bonding. But one of the positives of this is that there's no offset from TriMet's payroll taxes for this. We'll see that that does come into play with some of our other authorities. One other thing that's not on this slide that I wanted to mention is lines of credit, borrowing from a bank. We do have the ability to do that, and we have used that in the past, primarily for like a stopgap measure when we have a timing issue with, we're expecting federal funding to come in, but it hasn't come in yet, and we need to actually spend that money, but we don't do that very often because the interest rates are just not very favorable. So that's the one other way of borrowing that we have statutory authority to do. Next slide, please. On to taxing. Obviously, you guys are all very familiar with the employer payroll tax. And the employer payroll tax has been authorized by the legislature for us for many, many years, since our very early days of existence. And it has provided by far the most, volume-wise, the largest and the most stable revenue stream that this agency has experienced currently and historically. As you know, in FY25, we received well over $500 million in employer payroll taxes to sustain this agency. So it does not require a voter approval to increase the employer payroll tax, but it does require legislative approval. And the legislature last granted authorization to this board to go ahead and raise the employer payroll tax increment in 2009. But it came with a number of strings. What they said during the Great Recession, when they agreed that we could raise it, was that the board would have to pass an ordinance, institute a law, that included a finding by this board that the economy had recovered sufficiently enough to add another incremental tax increase. And so the legislature passed that law, amended our statutes in 2009, and it took until 2015 for the board to actually pass that ordinance to increase the tax increment. And it was increased at that point to what the legislature had authorized, which is 0.1% in total. That's the total amount, and it has to be incremented over 10 years. And then, so we started implementing that in 2015. And we hit the ceiling in 2025. January of 2025 was the last time. So we have now exhausted our payroll tax increase authority, and we would need to return to the legislature. Yes.
Shelley, it's probably worth being clear too that that effort was reflected a very close and long, we put a lot of energy into building a close relationship with the business community, because since the legislature approves whether or not we can do this, they listen very closely to the business community on this.
No, that's a
And
very important point.
that was a significant priority of TriMet for about a decade.
Yes.
That frankly, I don't know that we've put the energy into it lately in the way that we did then.
Right. Thank you for noting that, because that is true. There was a lot of meetings, particularly with our largest employers that pay the payroll tax. So yes.
So do you have any insight, or Tyler, on, did they do it, did TriMet do it itself? Did it get an outside group to do that? I mean, what was a little bit more?
It was a combination. It was a combination of outside help. We had, you remember Tom Margraf, he was part of that effort.
It was
Bernie Bottomley, who was in-house at that time.
And Aaron Dees, who was in-house.
Exactly. So yes, there was it took a village.
Folks were targeted to work on that.
Yes.
But it was a 5-year effort.
And the general manager at that time, Neil McFarland, actually went with Bernie to a number of these employers and met
Right,
with them
'cause they-
individually. Went to what was then called the Portland Business Alliance, PBA, and met with PBA repeatedly to talk about what were we going to offer in exchange for getting the tax increase.
And
So
what did we offer?
I think Tyler mentioned one of the things, yeah.
It was it was an effort. I would say you start the relationship building. It's not a transaction.
No,
You
no,
start
I
the
know.
relationship building years before you're going down to Salem.
Right.
TriMet made a series of commitments at the time around employer service. So what routes and how we were getting people to work in particular.
Okay.
Which would likely look different now in
Yeah.
this commuter climate.
Right.
Yeah.
We tried a couple of pilot, I think some of the pieces, and JC or Miles, feel free to correct me. I believe some of our shuttles were actually
You're
part of
right.
that discussion.
North Hillsborough is an
Yeah,
example.
yeah, and Forest Grove's shuttle?
Yeah.
And then we also made a series of commitments around other budget and cost management across the agency and partnerships with the business community in the long term.
Would it be safe to say at this point, like today, some of that is eroded?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it's not at, yeah.
That relationship,
I just want to confirm, that,
Yeah.
yeah, because that's where I was going.
and I don't mean that in
No,
any
no,
way
no, but we're
reflective
not
of-
at the level of where we were when we made, okay.
No, and it is a full-time job for, I
Okay.
would say, multiple government affairs staff.
Staff to do that, okay, just get clarity for all the board, okay.
And one last point on that exact issue. You aren't trying to get the business community to support the tax. You're simply trying to get them to be neutral, not
Yes.
oppose it, and which is what happened last time.
Right.
So the very last point on taxing that I wanted to make on this slide is a key provision in another statute, which we will get to in just a moment, which is there's no double dipping. If you charge an employer payroll tax, if you charge an employer a payroll tax, you cannot also, at the same time, charge them the business license fee that we're going to talk about in a minute. So I call it no double dipping. Next slide, please. So TriMet's enabling statutes specifically have a separate law that allows us to charge both a personal and a corporate net income tax, as you see up there on the slide. And this does not require voter approval or legislative approval. It can be done by board ordinance. The personal income tax is limited to 1% of total taxable income. And it could be applied. We've heard this from a couple of folks who've come to public forum over the last year. It could be applied to only high earners over a certain income threshold. As we've seen, other jurisdictional partners recently do that, Metro, Multnomah County. Mentioning those other jurisdictional partners reminds me to remind you that yes, this power or authority has been used frequently by other jurisdictions in recent times, and including the state, right? The State Transportation Improvement Fund is passed and implemented by a tax currently on employee payroll throughout the state. Yes. Which leads to, even though that's not a TriMet tax, even though it's not implemented under TriMet's enabling statutes, you might get some people that pay that tax who would conclude that a personal income tax by TriMet is a double dipping or viewed as like, I'm already supporting public transportation. So worth noting. Yes.
Is that are we, sorry, just to be clear, are we talking about public opinion in that moment, or are we talking about legal?
Public opinion, sorry. Under the corporate net income tax on net income of an entity doing business within the district, that too is limited to 1% of net income. And it's not an either or like what we saw on the prior slide, where you have to charge either an employer payroll tax or a business license fee. But if you charge a corporate net income tax, you have to allow a credit for any employer who has already paid the employer payroll tax. So it would just be a credit against that. So worth noting. Next slide, please. So we've talked about borrowing or bonding, and we've talked about taxing. There's a third category within our enabling statutes, and that is charges and fees. And the first one of these is user charges, and just like it suggests, it can only be applied against people who actually use our services or our facilities. So this is where we get the authority to charge fares, for example. These kinds of user charges can be implemented through board ordinance. It does not require legislative approval, further legislative approval. Some examples, in addition to fares, are that we have considered a number of times over the last couple of decades whether or not to charge parking fees at our fully employed park and rides, but we haven't ever actually done that. And then fines for non-payment of fare are also included within this statute. Next slide, please. Now, this one is, by contrast, One that you can, the TriMet board does have authority to charge any business, trade, occupation, or professional organization a license or a fee, regardless of whether or not they use TriMet's facilities or services. For some reason, there's a carve-out in the statute for insurance companies. Go figure, but anybody else? As you can imagine, over the years at TriMet, this particular statute has been looked at and considered and discussed and studied many, many times. A couple of examples include back in the 1980s, the board did pass an ordinance that that charged a fee, a business license fee of 1% on wholesale petroleum products that were used within the district. That actually was overturned by the Oregon Supreme Court on the strangest of grounds, failure to adequately provide public notice of the meeting at which the board implemented that ordinance. So, and then what happened, because it had gone up to the Oregon Supreme Court, is it drew attention to what the board was doing, and it just kind of died on the vine. So there's that one. There have been a lot of other considerations and studies. Back in the early 90s, for example, TriMet commissioned a study on all of the parking spaces within the TriMet district that were, paid commercial lots or employer-free parking that they provide to their employees. But again, because of that no double dipping provision, it would have been extremely expensive per parking space to, of a business license fee to make it pencil out because of the employers that would then not have to pay the employer payroll tax. So those have kind of gone by the wayside as well. Right. And then similarly to the stiff legislation, back in the 80s, we also considered charging auto dealers a fee based on gross sales, a business license fee. And there was major opposition by that group, and so that did not proceed, so.
And that was included not for transit, but was part of the pay for HB 2017?
No, we're talking on that example about something back in the 1980s.
Okay, but it is now.
Yes. Yeah, well,
Right.
yeah.
Yes, not a growth.
So, next slide, please. Oh, yes.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm familiar with even the transportation package that just failed in '25. There was major pushback from auto dealers on exactly the same concept, the concept of a privilege tax. I do wonder, just jurisdictionally, it's different in the context of the state legislature than it would be here in the context of our board. We have sole statutory authority to authorize a tax like that strictly through our agency as a board. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm sorry, can we go back to the preceding slide, Ruth? Yeah. Well, I think they're going to cover that, sorry, in the next presentation.
Okay, so we would have to ask. We do have to ask.
So when it says board ordinance, sorry. So when it says board ordinance.
We
it
do
is-
have the statutory authority to charge certain fees and license fees, just like what we've talked about. So what's your specific question?
My question is whether the legislature has agency in shaping that decision. If we could, for instance, pass a board ordinance authorizing a business license fee for auto dealers, for instance, would that ordinance then have to be blessed and instated by the legislature, or do we have sole discretion over that decision?
Yeah, my understanding is that we could do it.
Okay,
So those car dealers would then not have to pay the payroll tax.
copy. That makes sense. And can you guys give a little bit more context on why insurance providers were exempted?
I wish I could.
Okay.
I mean, I probably couldn't answer that in the next couple of weeks by going
Yeah.
back and looking in the legislative history, but I think
Okay.
it was probably somebody was an effective lobbyer
Yeah.
for the insurance industry.
Okay, and this
That would
was-
be my guess.
This happened in what era?
That has been around for decades.
Okay.
This statutory provision, so,
Okay.
Yeah, at least since the early 1980s.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yes.
So in that same context, does there have to be some nexus between the profession and TriMet's mission?
No, although historically, has been kind of the angle that TriMet has approached it at, is there some nexus to transportation? Hence the parking spaces, auto dealers, I mean, that's what you see, but no, there's no statutory requirement that it have to have a transportation nexus.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm now outside of our actual revenue question, and I'm now into a pricing and policy conversation that Tara knew was coming. Well, I just want to ask about the parking space question. So the money that we would collect from that would be deducted from the amount of the payroll tax. So from the perspective of raising revenue,
No, it would be either or. You could not charge the employer payroll tax and a business license fee.
dang it. Okay, so even if you were just going to charge a tiny amount for parking as a policy change, you gut your payroll.
Under the current statutory scheme, I think you're going to hear in the next presentation of some ideas of maybe some changes that could be made at the legislative level.
I mean, you're probably not raising enough to really drive money there, but I was interested in a policy pricing dynamic.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
you bet.
Maybe there's a subset of parking for automated parking versus the Intel parking, right, for employees. But anyway, my question, Shelley, just to be sure, similar to how the employer payroll tax requires legislative approval, when it comes to the business trade occupational licenses and fees, that it would require legislative approval as well.
No, the short answer is no. You could do this by a board ordinance, but it
Yeah.
would depend on what you're actually trying to
Yes.
do, I think. And then there are some other limitations I didn't want to get to in the weeds here, like if you're going to do some sort of an auto-related or, then you've got the Oregon Constitution provisions that kick in.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to cover those as well. So yes.
Yeah, have we done like a landscape assessment of instances in which the juice would be worth the squeeze to lose out on the payroll tax that we'd otherwise be getting by imposing a licensing fee?
Well, I think that one example that comes to mind immediately is the one that we did in the 90s about the parking spaces. There were, I think the study from CH2M Hill concluded there were about 560,000 parking spaces. I'm not sure if I said that out loud. And what you would have to charge per space in order to compensate for the hundreds of millions of dollars that we were raising. I mean, I can't do math in my head necessarily, but you can imagine it would be, I don't know, $100,000 a space or something to compensate for that. So the juice worth the squeeze, I think you're going to hear a little bit more about some of that assessment and evaluation on some of these other new revenue generation things too.
And then are there, just to follow up on that, are there any businesses similar to the way that this statute came together? It seems that the insurance agency was effective in securing an exemption, right, from these licensing fees. Are there any instances in which employers have been exempted from paying into the payroll tax more broadly?
Well, we've got state agencies that are separate. They pay a in lieu tax on their payroll that's limited to 0.06. It's not 0.08, which is what, 08327, which is what our current. There's those, then there's self-employment tax. They don't have to pay both because they're self-employed. And then I think it's nonprofits are not subject to the tax, yeah.
Okay.
And clergy.
And churches. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Tyler's got another
No, I'm
question.
sorry, I'll stop. No, it's not, it's a comment.
Oh,
Okay. I just think the other thing that we should remember as a board in this context, and we all saw this fight, or we saw the preview of this fight around preschool for all last spring, is there are places where we may have authority, but if we do not do our groundwork, both with community leaders in the business community and with legislators and with the governor, we end up doing the sort of thing, it's sort of an allegory of then we go to court and lose based on public comment, and the steam is totally gone, right? But in this case, it could be the governor or the legislature just saying, actually, you don't have that authority anymore. And that is not a big loss on their part and a catastrophic loss on ours. So that's just to remind us all that all of these take work, even when it's just a board ordinance.
Thank you. Okay, next slide. We're almost finished. Next to last slide is vehicle registration fees. This is also in our enabling statutes. Just a couple quick points about this one. They do require voter approval. All 3 counties within the TriMet district currently assess and charge vehicle registration fees. Any proceeds from vehicle registration fees would be limited by that Oregon constitutional provision that I mentioned. So you could only expend it on certain very limited things like roads, road improvements. And then I think it's worth mentioning, back to JT's point about what's already in the stiff not resolution, but the initiative that's up for vote right now. And that is, I think, vehicle registration fee increases are included in that initiative, so. And last slide, outside of our enabling statutes, we also have authority to charge what's called systems development charges. This is in another chapter, 223. And if you've ever tried to build an accessory dwelling unit or any kind of new construction in the city of Portland, you're very familiar with these charges. They can be done by board ordinance or resolution. They don't require legislative approval, further legislative approval. But they come with a lot of limitations. On the front end, this board would have to approve a capital improvement plan that identifies specifically the projects as well as the specific costs that the system development charges would go towards. And then SDC charges by U.S. Supreme Court decision can only be roughly proportional. What you can charge can only be roughly proportional to the impact that the new development is going to have on, in this case, the transportation system surrounding it. And then finally, you can only collect charges that are based on the net new development. So if you had a 1,000-square-foot building, you tore that down, you built a 1,200-square-foot building, you could only charge SDCs on the 200 square feet in new development. So that's on the front end. On the back end, they're also limited in what you can use the proceeds for. Specifically projects that are really only capacity increasing. And capacity increasing is defined up there on the slide, but it includes anything providing new service to new populations. So, and with that, that's TriMet's current existing statutory authority.
Thank you, Shelley. Any final questions for Shelley? Remember, if other thoughts, ideas come up, she will be here till the end of the retreat. Yes.
Quick question, Shelley.
Director Kemp.
So when we think about the exempt list, current exempt list for the employer payroll tax, since no double dipping went, if we were to explore the license and fees under 360, if the board were to specifically target the current exempt list, like the insurance, public school districts, right, credit unions and so forth, my immediate thought is that the impact on the employer payroll tax would be minimal. Would you agree with that? If
we were able to collect.
If the license and fees under 360 is specifically targeted for the exempt list under the employer payroll tax, such as
Yes.
the insurance, school districts.
Yeah, because we're not getting
Right.
that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Not hearing,
For the business fees. Because we can't double dip anyway. Because they're not paying. So my thought process was that since those industries, right, are not, now I'm not saying we tackle all of them, but, because 501c3, that's a public perception matters and we want the public support. But when it comes to the industries that are currently exempted from the employer payroll tax, for whatever reasons, like the insurance industry. What if we were to, now I'm thinking about what would be the most efficient lever that we could pull as a board without having to go out on the streets or down to Salem, right? So I'm thinking about the path of least resistance. And so I don't know how many federal credit unions are out there in our district. I don't know, actually, I do know some, how many public school districts are out there, but I'm thinking about those kind of industries. So that was sort of my thought and what we're talking about, yeah. Yeah. And, yeah, like private home employers, I mean, those folks, right?
Okay.
And to that point, I think it would be really helpful for us to get a list of those exempted entities for exactly Director Kim's point, just as a broader consideration. And then I think once we have a clearer sense of what that landscape looks like, we could go a step further and start to dig in on not only like political viability of different options, because to your point, Thomas, they're going to vary. Taxing or charging a business licensing fee to an insurance provider is very different than charging that same fee to a school district, right? But it would be interesting once we do identify, or if we can identify, I should say, a list of politically viable potential targets to get a sense for potential revenue that could be gleaned by imposing varying levels of fees. Yeah, I love that idea.
Okay. I'll check with Sam and Shelley to see path forward to bringing that information. Okay, forward. Okay. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break for various needs. All right. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We now have, we're moving to some different topics after our break. We will have a presentation and update from our revenue team, and then we will stop and retrieve our lunch and keep working. So it will be a working lunch break. And then after that, we have some discussions, open discussions on new revenue. So, and we did bring up the whiteboard. I think it's Gwen, or will be taking, and you had two things in your opening that you shared. What was things you were looking for, and I wanted her to note those. Remember the two? Write them down. Do you remember them?
Yeah, it was just a path to stabilizing the agency long-term
Okay.
through this conversation about new revenue in both the short and the long-term.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wanted to write that down on the board. And then we'll have a update on the financial scorecard from Nancy, and then some closing remarks. Okay, let's turn our attention to our Chief Public Affairs Officer, J.C. Vanetta, and Governmental Affairs Program Manager, Tara O'Brien, here to provide us with an update from the TriMet Revenue Team. Go team.
Well, good morning. As you just heard from Shelley, everything is easy, so our work is done. No, we have been doing a lot of work for the past 2 years, and Sam, this last February, formalized it into a revenue action team as part of TriMet 2030. And Tara O'Brien has taken the lead of that committee, that action team, and has just done an amazing job bringing a lot of things together. And so I'm very, very grateful for her help, and that we have team members from all 6 of our divisions who are working on this. So it is definitely involving the entire agency. Next slide, please. So when we think about a new revenue strategy, we want to make sure that it aligns as we explore and assess new revenue opportunities. You just had a mini discussion about some of those ideas. We're doing the same thing. We want to make sure that it's politically viable and, if possible, publicly supported. And I will say this, we don't want to take on anything if we can't be successful because of our resources. Next slide. So you can read through kind of the scope of our new revenue strategy. What we're really working toward are those large larger amounts of funding that we can go after that are sustainable. Director Flowers had made the mention, is the juice worth a squeeze? And we are definitely using that as a filter when we look at some of our revenue sources. What I would say to you is that we're not looking at, as part of our overall action team, not looking at one-time only funds, our grants folks, and we constantly are looking for those, but that's not really the heart of what our team is working on. And we're also not really focusing in on those those one-offs of revenue generation, like advertising, our Ticket to Ride program, which has been successful, our TOD program. Those will continue on, and those teams are working on how to augment the funding, but that's not the focus of our revenue strategy. Next slide, please. Just a couple of highlights I want to share with you on how far we've come. And a lot of it has been on the revenue strategy with regard to the state legislature. We started in summer of 2024 going around the state activating transit riders and transit enthusiasts, and we got incorporated into the transportation package a tripling of the STIF, which would have meant $100 million more in sustainable revenue for TriMet. We were successful in doing that. Now, the package ultimately failed. It was not TriMet's fault. It was largely politics unrelated to transit. So I just want to share that with you. And we continue on. We have done so much work that we will continue working on that path forward. I also want to note here in this picture that we are starting to build that coalition of advocates. I call it an advocate stable. The Transit Community Advocacy Roundtable in this picture, we brought 50 groups from around the region together to talk about transit, to talk about the value of transit, and to help start teaching them how to advocate for transit. My apologies. Go ahead.
TriMet did this?
Yes.
In your team? Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
We call it internally TCAR because we love acronyms. And we continue to activate our Riders Club, and we are working at the state level to strengthen our Oregon Transit Association because we know that we need our brothers and sisters from across Oregon to help us as we go after a much larger ask of the legislature. Next slide.
Okay, so now I'll talk a bit about some of the work that is already underway and what's coming up for our new revenue exploration. So here's a short timeline of what's happening over the next few months. I do want to emphasize that our team, Government Affairs, in coordination with Finance and Legal, had really begun to build this list of what is possible under our statutory authority and really building out the comprehensive options available to us last year. And then this new revenue team, we really brought folks from across the agency to help lend their expertise as well. And right now, we are really working to build out that evaluation and research to prioritize the options that are really the best bang for the buck, is the juice worth the squeeze, to make sure that we know we have a limited capacity on what will raise us new revenue. And so we look forward to bringing the discussion here today into what we will assess moving forward. As part of this assessment, we will be looking at political feasibility as a primary component of how we do this work, and to bring this prioritized list into the process underway led by the governor and her vision committee, which we're thankful to have Director Frisbee sitting at that table to make sure that we are telling the story of why we need new revenue and bringing some options to that table. And later this summer and fall, we really are focused on building that coalition and partnerships to be successful. We cannot be successful in raising new revenue on our own, and we are very aware of that and putting the time and attention into how to best focus those strategic partnerships. And then lastly, I'll just note in the fall, we are doing some assessment right now of the economic impact of the transit system to the region. We know that that is so critical to be making our case not only at the legislature, but for any regional or local funding. And we'll have some great numbers to share and enhance our story in that way. And that is part of the new revenue work as well. Next slide. And so now some of the categories of new revenue that we're looking into and that we look forward to hearing your discussion about later today. And so first category is the we will be going to the state in 2027 to seek ongoing state funding and continuing to build on what we had gotten in the last transportation package and know that that's a critical component to success. And then our second category, as Shelley just made clear, the type of revenues that we're legally able to raise must be granted by the state. And so that second category is really looking at developing a prioritized list of, are there additional statutory authorities that we would like to seek? Or are there policy changes that we want to champion? And that's both in the short term and in the long term. We know there's a limited number of things that we can push for and be successful in 1 year. And so we are building that list to try and prioritize where we think we would have the most revenue opportunity and what is possible. Third category, as Shelley mentioned, we do have the authority to move forward with a ballot measure for new revenue. We know that that is challenging right now, which J.C. will speak to in a moment, just because of voter and public sentiment, but we are continuing to evaluate if there is any path to being successful at the ballot and look forward to more discussion on that. The strategic category is really but what about this? What is actually within our control that is a way to raise new revenue that we are able to move forward with? And this is shrinking as we learn more information. And as you heard there, though we could impose fees on our park and rides, we're assessing whether that is something that is viable to move forward with. And so there are not many things on this list that are right now in our control that do not require us to seek additional permission. And then this last category is really looking to regional and local partnerships. So it would require cooperation with the city, county, or metro to either raise revenue together or policy change at another level of government. So not fully within our control, but also important. We know we have allies and are building partners for that reason. And last, next slide, please. So we are keeping our evaluation process simple, and these are the criteria we are using to help us prioritize where to focus our energy as we look at new revenue opportunities. Next slide. Now we'll move on to some challenges in the current process right now. So there, of course, as you have read in the news, there are many concerns about affordability and new taxes or fees. It is a difficult time to raise revenue right now with so many of our partners at other levels of government also facing major cuts. And many of our partners have also relied on one-time funding to fill these budget gaps, and so we're also looking for ongoing new revenue at the same time that we are. And other transportation revenues, like the gas tax, cannot be used for transit operating. And so there are some restrictions to other forms of transportation revenue, which I'm sure Director Frisbee can speak to as well when she returns. I know much of her organization's study is looking into this. And I will note with some of the discussion about business community and our relationships there, we did work closely with leaders in the business community to help champion our legislation in the short session to really focus on the need for transit funding, and are continuing to build those relationships locally, both Sam and our government affairs team, to make sure that we have them as allies with us and acknowledging our need for new revenue. Though the business community has traditionally been supportive of state transportation packages, I will note that Oregon Business and Industry actually opposed the 2025 transportation package and the stiff increase that they found most objectionable. So that is something that we are planning for and needing to continue to consider as we work to improve those relationships and strengthen them to have allies. Turning it over to JC.
Next slide, please. So just a little bit of a reality check for us and what we're up against. These are two polls from Metro and the Portland Metro Chamber. The first one, 72% tax rates too high based on services received. And we're hearing that a lot around the whole notion of raising taxes for the same amount of services or less. And it's not sitting well with folks. Another poll, 60% amount amount paid in local taxes, either an extremely serious or very serious problem, up from 46%. And you probably just saw this yesterday in the Oregonian, where taxes and the cost of living have grown in importance in this long list of things that voters care about. Taxes and the cost of living is at the top. I would just point out that transit, traffic, congestion isn't even in the top 10. Next slide. So there's some work to do. This also is a poll from Metro last fall. Again, just kind of reemphasizing that it's not even on the radar of folks. It's not in the top 10. I would also say that in our own attitude and awareness survey from last year, that it rated as 6% of all the people said that that was their top issue. And we do have the attitude and awareness survey out right now as we want to gather more data to help us understand a path forward. Next slide.
All right, so the concerns over new taxes and fees are warranted. There are many under consideration or in the process of being implemented right now. And as part of our work at TriMet, we are tracking all of these and working closely with partner governments in those implementations. So this is not a comprehensive list, but I just wanted to give an example of some of the many different tax and fee increases that folks in our service area are looking at right now as they're hearing about our need for new revenue at the same time.
And I would say this is something they're watching closely. You know, behind closed doors, there's probably about another handful of taxes that are being considered and or potentially pushed forward. So President Lewis, you had said at one point, timing is everything. If we are wanting to slot in there at some point in time, we'll want to do it appropriately. Next slide, please. I would also just note that it's not all doom and gloom. Let's just face it, that we do have, there is trust in TriMet as an agency. We have a favorable rating that we received at our last attitude and awareness survey, the last two customer satisfaction surveys, and we'll see what our next attitude and awareness survey shows. But we have trust. We have a great foundation of trust and favorability in our region. The value of transit is absolutely important to our region. And Tara made mention of some work that we're doing. We actually last fall hired Eco Northwest to bring on board because we want, by the numbers, to show our community how valuable we are to them. I use this example of back in the day, we used to put these bumper stickers on the back of our buses that said, 60 cars would be in front of you right now if I weren't on the road. And it hammered home our importance to the person driving their car behind our bus, just how we factored into congestion. When we went back to update that bumper sticker, just to continue that thought, the math had changed, the inputs had changed. And so we found ourselves with some of the ways that we had communicated before out of date. And so really hiring Eco Northwest to really give us a full report of by the numbers how important we are is going to be crucial. So we'll have that data by the end of the summer, and you'll start seeing that showing up in some of the things that we are saying to the public this fall. We are seen as affordable option in the eyes of rising gas prices and inflation. People are really turning to us and seeking out us. The Governor's Transportation Vision Committee, we are at the table with the governor, with lawmakers, in looking at what's next. Obviously, the vote next week is for the transportation package in front of voters, but then we're also looking at what's next and what's ahead in the long session of 2027. And then when we look at our tax reform discussions, they are happening at the state level and local level, and we are part of those discussions. So we want to be a part when that happens. Next slide. Just some takeaways, and these are you could have probably written this slide yourself. Can you go to the next slide, please, if you wouldn't mind? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Partnerships. And I think that is first and foremost and something that we have been working on, getting Sam out of the community, getting government affairs folks out in the community to build those, bringing people across the region together. We have a strong public confidence, but we always know that we can do more. So what does that look like, and how do we keep building that confidence from our public? The 2027 state legislature remains our focus as we look to stabilize the organization. Director Flowers, you're absolutely correct. How do we get to that point of stabilization while we work on other funding sources for expansion, for state of good repair? We need some of that cushion. And so truly, the state legislature, the legislative session is our focus. And you know this as well as I do. Most of the decisions, and what Shelley shared with you, most of the decisions on new revenue are not ours to implement. We need others. We are not alone in that decision. So what we really need to do is take all of the revenue ideas that we have, prioritize them, align them with what is possible, and then set out and be successful with them. So that is our presentation for you. We would love to answer any questions that you might have. Again, we have a list of 200 that we is it probably 200 that we've worked on? One of them being a reality series hosted on TriMet. I'll say that did not make it to the list, but that we've heard a lot of those ideas and we are carefully evaluating them for you.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make a side comment. Director Frisbee will be sharing with us the Governor's Vision Committee update to the entire board. It's not on the agenda. And then I'm hoping that when we have our board meetings, I met with her, oh, that's not her. She'll be updating us because they are meeting monthly until the end of December. And so that is viable information that's coming directly since she is a member of, there she is. When we finish here, I have you after they're done, and then she'll bring that information to us. So that, because I think it's very important, the work she's doing, not representing TriMet, make sure that's clear for the public, but she is a member of that committee and should bring that information firsthand to the board. So we will hear today from her after we finish, and then at each board meeting, she'll bring us an update, hopefully. Okay, all right. I smell a question, yes.
Oh, I got a question. I know we're getting.
Now we're going to go back to questions for, because I remember you had mentioned a couple of comments on the Vision Committee, and I just wanted to say that so that you didn't have to go. Tyler can do the speaking for that. Okay, questions for the revenue team? Cards up. Okay, let's start with JT and then Director Kim.
Okay, so thank y'all so much. I know we're about to get into a much broader conversation about new revenue, so I'll save a lot of my thoughts for that conversation.
Good.
This is a very targeted and specific question relative to the way we legally have the right to use or not use our own advertising space. So for instance, the advertising that goes up on a side of a bus or on a bus stop, could we legally use that space to promote a certain political outcome? For instance, if we were trying to advocate on behalf of people voting yes on a ballot measure, could we use advertising space that we own?
It comes to a certain point. At one point, it's in educational. So it's like transit is important, transit is needed, we might cut service, all of those things that are factual, that are informational, up until a point where the lawmakers might be voting on it, where it might be referred to voters, is where we cannot do anything. Meaning we can't even send out an email to our Writers Club to say, hey, tell your lawmaker to do X, vote yes or vote no. We can't use the sides of our buses or trains. We can't do any of that. Now, I will say that what we do work with is Voices for Public Transit, which is owned by APTA. It's a group of people. They have about 3,500 people in Oregon, and we're looking for people to sign up to that, where at some point in time, we can trigger APTA. APTA will send the message to that group of people to then go out and contact their lawmaker. So there is a defining area of what we can and cannot do.
Copy. So
Before you finish, what the idea was advertising or shifting our advertising?
just thinking about the
We can't do it.
thinking about the way that we leverage our advertising space to. Oh. And this is just kind of like it's not a revenue question, it's the public. So I'm wondering, like, we could theoretically say, our system's facing X number of dollars of cuts. Help us save the transit service you rely on every day. Learn more at TriMet.org.
absolutely
And then we
do
can have a
that.
whole bunch of information on why we're facing these cuts and all the different arenas in which these decisions will be made. Is that?
Absolutely do that.
Okay.
Can
Okay.
you, so my understanding is the Secretary of State has become much more limited in what they will approve. And so, everything that you put up has to be approved by the Secretary of State post-referral. And so.
Post-referral,
They
yes.
are
Before
very
that-
stringent.
Before that, we have leeway.
Right, but that means like, if you're referring, so folks who have stuff on the ballot now in May probably referred in February, which means after February, you couldn't do that, likely.
Well, you could probably still say, like, you could probably still have an ad that says, this is what's happening, learn more at
Yes.
blank.
Yes.
Yeah.
Transit faces cuts, go find out more X. Yeah, it just can't give a position. Like,
That's right.
tell your congressman to vote yes
Yes.
on, yeah.
Yeah, it just, the reason I raise it is because I think we have avenues that we don't max out in communicating what's happening to our system with the people who rely on our system. And I think it's very visible across multiple channels, right? We get, I would say, pretty low engagement at our actual board meetings, like compared to, for instance, an Oregon Transportation Commission hearing. I mean, I've gone to Transportation Commission meetings in Ontario that have more people showing up from Portland and Salem than our own TriMet board meetings do. I think that reflects a lack of engagement with the public. I think even our Instagram, like if I'm able to make a video in an hour and a half on my personal page that can do more views than 85, 90% of the videos on the TriMet official page with 30,000
You're more
followers.
attractive than the bus, but yeah.
I don't know, I think the bus looks good, but I appreciate
They want
it.
to see you than TriMet bus.
As much as I appreciate it, I think we can max out that avenue as well. And then I'm also trying to think about all the space that we have on our own equipment, right? Whether it's buses, whether it's trains, whether it's bus stops, max stations. Like, we can be pulling people more actively into the information gathering process, even if we can't explicitly articulate or push them towards a particular stance on an issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add a note, and then Thomas, and then Tyler, that I did, when I was talking with Sam, told him that some of our, no offense to anyone who does the wraps on the bus, but some of them were like, we can do better. I mean, some of the wraps on our bus were, they could be a little livelier. I mean, some of them were like, oh, really? So, yes, leveraging our advertising is a good, I agree with you on that. The details and the weeds, what we can and can't do, that's where staff is helpful, but to really go back is a good idea. But yeah, some of the wraps, and then some of the bus stands where folks are is pretty blah.
And just a quick note for both of you, though, too. So we contract all that out. So we actually only have a very small space allotted on our system. Everything else is contracted out for a vendor who sells that on behalf of ours. I can't remember how much money we make a
We
year
can
off of
change
it.
that.
We are, an RFP
Okay,
is going
all
out
right,
in a couple of weeks.
okay. I was gonna say,
So we're already ahead of you.
Everything is open. We can change it.
Yep.
Because if it hasn't worked, that's what, the conversations today is, here we are, cutting services. And so it's obvious some of the things we have done is, it's time to pivot and look in new ways.
Yep.
Okay. Director Kim, and then
Thank you.
Director Frisbee.
I'm all for looking into all the nooks and crannies, but I'm less so concerned about the advertising stuff, because dollars are already coming in, right? The bench is already taken up. I mean, so that's that. First of all, thank you, Tara and JC. To your list of 200 wonderful ideas, would you add 4 more for me? The last comment that I mentioned when we were discussing with Shelley, I thought more about it during the break. So if we were to invoke the 360, creating a license fee, right? So the privilege of doing business in the district. I hope we get to sort of aim at leveling the playing field to capture revenue from those employers who have employees who may utilize our system, but those employers are not currently contributing to the system. And specifically, the 4 federal credit unions, insurance carriers, domestic services, and 501c3 nonprofits. And I specifically did not mention public schools because of bullet number 3 and 5, right? Public acceptability, political feasibility. So I specifically didn't include public schools in that ideas. When it comes to the other, we really want to be capturing those folks because when we look at the employer tax, they are paying their fair share, right? And these particular employers are currently not. And I also think about the board ability to pull down a lever as opposed to having to go to a legislature. So this would be in addition to the 200 ideas. So just wanted to voice my thought as it currently stands. Thank you.
Absolutely, and may I just ask to clarify, so Shelley, would that require legislative change to be able to? Okay, so Shelley will look into that and we'll get back to you as we explore that category of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Frisbee.
I want to take a little bit of a step back because I think this group could hang out in the tactical space all day, but that's actually really decidedly not our job as board members. And I'm also going to push back on some of the wording in your slides because what you brought today is not a strategy. It is a set of values and it is a set of things that you're using to think about this work, but it is actually not a strategy at all, and that a strategy is what we need. And, you know, the way that I think about this when I start to look at it is we have an immediate short-term need to sort of staunch the bleeding. We, over the long term, you know, the state needs to play a bigger role in this work. You know, talking with folks at the state level, they're sort of like, well, we played a big role in HB 2017. And it goes back to the inflation cost, inflation reality, right? The role that you committed to playing in 2017, you are not playing right now. And so state, if you want to continue to play the role you said you were committed to, you have to change what you're doing. We say that as if it's a very straightforward conversation. It is a very hard and very complicated conversation that involves building and rebuilding a lot of relationships. So I'm looking at the GR team, appreciating you guys, and knowing that we can sort of glibly say things that actually represent years of work. And frankly, a bigger team than we have now. So to me, that is part of it. I also believe, unfortunately, that the state will never act to meet the full need of TriMet, right? Our riders want more out of us than riders in Bend, riders in Eugene, riders in Salem. And we have a commitment to meet that. We were talking a little bit down in Salem about some of the other places who have just cut really, really early and now run a bus like twice a day, and that's their transit system. We're not going to end up there. We will not do that. But we will have to act in some way at the region. I think you both did a really good job of laying out the headwinds against that right now. And when I look at that work, to me, that is something that we can only do working incredibly closely with partners. It is probably a regional effort, and it probably involves some structural changes to our current taxing approach as a region. We had a little bit of the heyday, which I can take some blame for, as part of the agency that passed 4 of those measures, when we passed a lot of things. And that's coming home to roost, in combination with a struggling economy and decisions by this administration that are raising the costs for folks who live here. So we need to, I think we need to figure out what is that approach? How do we work with people? And then I think I can't remember, fourth piece, I guess, is, and we've talked a little bit about this, and we've talked about this as an agency, is how are we looking at our structures and our spending? Because part of what we need to do, both in order to go down to Salem and in order to talk to voters here and talk to people here, is not just, well, we already cut, like, here's all the service we cut, and here's the jobs that we cut, but here's actually how we're thinking structurally about what we deliver and how we deliver it as well as we can, and how we've streamlined efforts. That's a really hard undertaking, and I acknowledge that. We're seeing transit agencies across the country, some doing it well. You're seeing RTDs do some really interesting work around the way they're thinking about delivering service in different ways post-COVID. You're seeing other folks be like, well, our answer is just that line doesn't exist anymore. There are no easy answers right now. I would say there are better, harder answers, and there are worse, hard answers. So that is my push, is that we actually need to think somewhat structurally about the way that we do this work and what the multi-pronged effort is. And then, you know, I believe and I would expect that something comes to the board in combination with a carefully thought out strategy that also says, here's the actual investment that needs, right? If we're gonna be out talking to folks in the community, we need a stronger team to do that. We need, I think, more folks in GR to build some of the relationships and do some of the work that we need to be doing. We probably need to spend money to better understand our riders and the folks and our non-riders, and understand where they are and what they think about us. So I look forward to a strategy and seeing that from you guys.
Yeah, okay, I'll be quick. I agree with much of what Director Frisbee said. I just want to add one caveat. I think while our strategy needs to be carefully thought out, it also needs to be quickly thought out. We need to act in a timely way. I think sometimes big agencies like ours can almost kill themselves just via the sheer churn of bureaucracy and process. We need to be nimble enough to meet the moment. And that means understanding that we are facing a pinch from two different directions. One is a short-term pinch that impacts the cultural politics of who is with us, who's willing to stick their neck out for us, and the service and value proposition that we make to everyday people. And then the second is these long-term structural challenges to the way that we fund our agency, which given, I mean, the way we've structured this, are completely nonsensical when compared to other transit agencies on a national level. So we do need to be figuring out what we do in 2027. And I do agree with Tyler that this doesn't feel like a strategy as much as a value proposition. I'll also say I disagree with some core pieces of this, particularly the takeaway that says the 2027 legislature remains our primary focus for new revenue. And I'll talk about it in greater detail when we get into this next session with our lunches, but I think our strategy needs to be far more comprehensive, far-reaching, and I do think that we need to think of these other levers we've mentioned, right? Public acceptability, political feasibility, not as static, but as malleable, right? We have the agency to shape these two things, right? Political feasibility actually flows through public acceptability. And I'd say core to my theory of change is the notion that culture drives politics and not vice versa. So I'd just like us to internalize that a little bit more and incorporate it into the strategic conversations we're having about both short-term and long-term challenges that we're facing.
May I just respond? I would say, Director Flowers, that part of why we are exploring this work is to not only focus on the state legislative session. We agree that remains the shortest term focus of where we need to seek revenue, but that we are interested in your thoughts and continuing to build that list of what else is possible and what is within our control that we can move forward on quickly to gather the revenue that we need to move forward. So thank you for your comments.
Seeing no other comments, hands up, let's have lunch. Grab lunch and come back. You got A couple of minutes, but we're going to continue due to time, so grab food and return. I've asked our board member to bring us an update from the governor's vision committee. I'll let her share the proper title, what she's doing, and on and on. I'll turn it over to Director Frisbee.
The governor's transportation, ooh, let's see. Here we go. The governor's transportation vision work group met for the first time last Friday. No, 2 Fridays ago. There are, I think, 9 of us on the panel from around the state. And we are tasked with the governor with delivering a set of priorities for funding from a state transportation system perspective. It is really important, and we clarified during the course of the meeting that our focus is not on ODOT solvency. Our focus is on what does a functional transportation system look like for the state? And which includes city and county funding, it includes transit funding, it includes the host of things that we need to help make sure people and goods can move around our state and connect to the rest of the economy and the rest of the market. So that group will be meeting monthly. So our task is both to identify priorities for funding and identify potential funding options and recommendations for the governor and the legislature to take up. It's really important to remember it all comes back to the 2027 legislature, acknowledging that there are lots of other pieces we need to do, but particularly for a statewide transportation package, the 2027 legislature is, they will be drafting the next package and crafting the next package. That the governor's vision work group has, I think, also 9 subcommittees, possibly more, focused on specific topics. One of those is transit. And I believe that will be chaired by Julie Brown, who is both a member of the OTC and head of Rogue Valley Transit Authority. There is also a work group focused on revenue options. There's also a work group focused on freight mobility. There is a work group focused on major projects, which is not just current major projects at ODOT, but how do we as a state undertake and build major projects and think about building major projects? And there's a community livability and safety work group as well. Those are some of the ones we discussed in the course of the meeting. I think the values that you heard from this group are, again, we are focused on a statewide transportation system, not just an ODOT problem. We are focused on, I think realistically, we are a short and medium term solution. One of the points that I actually raised during the charter discussion is we are not equipped, nor do we have the time to actually structurally rebuild our transportation funding approach the way that it needs to be structurally rebuilt. I think what we can do is point to that need. And at core, that comes down to the revenue mechanisms that have funded transportation are not designed to keep pace with transportation spending. And are focused on very specific types of transportation spending that are not the way that most of our spending happens now. So, I think the governor was very clear with what she expects from this group. She spoke to us on Friday. I think that there is a really great group of thoughtful, dedicated people. I think TriMet's job is to have a very clear understanding of what we need out of that process. That goes back to what I talked to about a strategy. What do we need the state to do? What is the state responsibility in funding transit? What does it mean if the state does not meet that? What does that mean, for our riders, for our system, but also for our economy, for the businesses who are starting here, for our greenhouse, for our climate pollution? What do all of those pieces mean? For our safety goals, we know that it is safer to ride transit than to be in your own car. What does it mean for folks who cannot drive? I think one of the points that I think we really need to emphasize statewide is there are, I think it's 1 in 3, I'm looking at Miles or Tara, 1 in 3 folks in Oregon who is of driving age is not able to drive. And that is a really significant number. And if we just focus on roads, we are leaving those people out. Transit is a critical component of meeting them where they are and getting them where they need to be. So I think TriMet needs to be really prepared to show up with really clear asks and needs. We need to, but in that, we also need to be flexible. There are places where we might need to give, and places where maybe there's a different way around to get to the same result. I think we need to work carefully with transit deliverers across the state and the larger sort of Move Oregon Forward, progressive, thoughtful environmental community. I also think this is a moment and a great opportunity where we have the chance to build relationships with other partners to understand what they need out of our transportation system and how can we help meet them and help them in those different ways. That's the business community, that's the freight community, that's rural Oregon. There are a lot, there's a lot of small towns who actually want somewhat similar perspectives and want similar things out of this process to what we do. And how do we start to build those relationships and build them where they are? So I appreciate the TriMet team's work so far, and we'll be working really closely with them. I think as Director Lewis and Dr. Lewis noted, everyone on that board is there in an individual capacity. But obviously, my relationship to TriMet is a key part of who I am as an individual, and we'll continue to carry that message forward.
Okay. Thank you. Any short, quick questions for Director Frisbee? Okay, thank you. And we look forward to hearing monthly updates. And in Aaron's absence, you can do a repeat again in 2 weeks. All right, so I do need to do a time check because we are far behind our schedule, and we said 1 o'clock we're done, and 1 o'clock we will be done. So I need to check in with Miss Nancy to let me know you have 30 minutes on there. Do you need the full 30? Give me a drop dead time. 15? Okay. All right.
Efficient.
Thank you. And Sam and I closing, we can talk fast. All right. All right. We have 90 minutes for our next session. We will not be able to do all of that. Some of the things here we've covered, but I want to focus on maybe some new items that are not here. Looking at the board members. And there were a couple of topics, but I'm going to do the hard one first, and that is going to be fare increases. There's been conversation of do we not, and it's been included. And so I've added that to the list just for us to have a conversation of what your thoughts are, comments, feel, okay. All right.
We don't have a lot of time, yeah?
Yes, so. go ahead.
Fare increase, it's a numerical increase in terms of the number of cents, number of dollars that folks pay to utilize our system. And that's perspective. I shared this a couple of years ago. Actually, it's been more than a few, huh? But see, I think less about from the perspective of, I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but less about the perspective of paying the fare, but about TriMet's need and where we're headed. So I think about our needs in terms of our purchasing power. So what I am for is our purchasing power with respect to the amount that is generated from our fare box revenue needs to stay constant or do better. And so some might say, oh, COLA or inflation adjusted, so that's why we need to track those sort of things. But again, it's less so about inflation as a whole, but about, hey, can we do the same amount of work or more based on the amount that we can get from the fare? So in short, I am generally for adjusting our fares so that the purchasing power would remain the same or better. So that's my opening thought about just when I think about fares in general. So yeah, I'll just end at that. Yep.
Okay. Director Flowers?
Yeah, I love Director Kim, and I think we can love people through differences in opinion. I am of the opinion that fare increases should be off the table. You know, it comes back to everything I've been saying. I do think that our ability to successfully navigate this very existential moment for our transit agency is going to hinge on our ability to bring people with us. I've said this to a number of y'all, but it came up in conversation with Sam. I feel like we are getting ready to go to battle to an extent we've never experienced in the history of this agency. We cannot go to battle without our Army behind us, and that Army is the everyday people who rely on our system, the people who operate our system. I think if we, for the sake of closing gaps, for the sake of preserving purchasing power, sell them downriver, I think that we will actually feel the brunt of that in the political arena in the form of weakened leverage and less ability to mobilize people at scale to actually exert pressure on the public sector. So that's my thoughts on this. I also have different thoughts on fare in general as a long-term thing, but we don't need to go down that wormhole right now.
Okay, but on fares, just a general note, we do mention our riders, but there's also TriMet employees. I mean, they are affected by lack of. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's not my opinion, but no fares and the decrease in fares, we lose employees because we can't pay them. So there is a flip side. Director Frisbee.
I guess I'm going to split the difference between
Okay.
my esteemed colleagues. I think my question would be first, fare increases is a very general title. Now,
Yeah.
next year, in 5 years, in 10 years. I think it was 8 years between fare increases.
10.
10.
It was 10, yeah.
Right. So
Which, yeah.
When I look across the country, so the things I would want to know before I looked at a fare increase is I would want to know how have our fares
last one.
changed or not changed compared to inflation and compared to our costs. I would want to know what are the things that how have other agencies addressed or dealt with their fares during the same time period?
Okay.
How do we stack up compared to other agencies in terms of fare costs and what people get for their fares? I am extremely unlikely to support a fare increase that does not hold harmless our low-income fare riders, and would also strongly push for changes in the way we deliver the low-income fare program.
Okay.
To make sure that it is more accessible if we increase fares.
Okay.
So those are the things that I would want to know. I agree very much with Director Flowers that this exact moment is not the right moment. I think both politically and also, I would love it if high gas prices were not here for a very long time, but I believe they are here for a very long
Yeah,
time.
I agree.
And I think I am hesitant to raise our fares in the middle of that when I think people are desperate for more affordable options. So I am not, for an immediate, like in the next 6 months to a year, I would have a hard time with it. Looking further out, I think, that would be 4 years since the last fare increase. I am comfortable and open to revisiting it on a regular basis to align with general costs. I think we had a conversation about this in the financial strategy plan last year. And so I am open to it. in that context and in the sort of, here are the things we need to know to make the decision. And I would really want us to look at how we deliver and how we provide access to the low-income fare program. Because I
Okay,
do
those
hear a
two
fair
key
amount of
things,
feedback.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Director Kellogg.
Thank you. So to synthesize what a lot of us have said here, I agree 100%. Today is not the day to decide whether we do a fare increase. We've got a period of time where we'll have a different set of circumstances to think about. But I want to go on the record. Philosophically, I do not support a no fare transit system. I think, if any public utility is going to be used and you don't pay into it, then you're going to have no respect for it, right? And we can't deny that we've got problem riders that don't pay and create loss of ridership for us as well as problems for those that are riding. And if we don't have the mechanism to say, you haven't paid your fare, get off the train, then that's one less tool we have to make this a pleasant experience for our riders, okay? Second, I think we ought to relook at how we charge fares, not in terms of paying at the fare box, but all the things they're doing on the roads, congestion pricing, value adds, things that make this transit experience worth it, right? If you were told you can get from downtown to the airport for $3 during rush hour, you do that every time, right? All other things considered. And why that fare isn't double or triple to reflect what it would cost to take an Uber or to pay for parking or to do these other things. I mean, instead of looking to other people to solve our revenue problem, and if you consider tax collection revenue, then you're a little different than me, but what are we doing as a business, right, to make value added so people are willing to pay more to say, yeah, I'm having a safe experience. Yeah, it's taking me where I want to go for less than I would otherwise spend or park a spot. So again, this is not an issue we're going to solve today, but I just want to put those thoughts out there so that people have time to let them marinate.
If we don't explore increasing our fares, and this is a loaded question, what within TriMet can we get rid of or remove or no longer fund or no longer support? Okay. Go ahead.
Well, 360 they were talking about.
Okay.
Now, I like your approach where it's a zero sum, therefore, if this doesn't come in, then we have to cut something.
just a
So
thought.
that's one approach, I think. But that does frame us to think in terms of cutting, right? So I already don't like that. Now, I think it's important to talk about the implications on other funding categories if we were to not increase fares or increase fares. There's that. And also, I want to be a little bit more optimistic and go, hey, if we were to be successful in some of our significant new revenue initiatives, one or more of the 200, ideas, this really would be at the bottom of that list. But again, that doesn't discredit my earlier statement that this is one of the tried and true levers that we do have, and the purchasing power needs to be there. A gallon gas cannot stay at 99 cents a gallon, right? So that's what I mean. So sorry I didn't answer your question, but I think maybe you have a direction there. I think I would hate to think about cutting more if we were to not increase fares, but what are some easier levers that has less drastic implications that we can pull?
I'm going to call on Kellogg, but I just want to comment on that. When you debit, you have to credit. So if we're not going to, we're looking at revenues, but I don't think we've looked hard enough internally. And so that's why I brought that to the table, to be a discussion. Yep. Director Kellogg?
I've already angered enough people.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Okay, because if,
I might not be too far off from you in this one, we'll see. I am respectfully rejecting the two lever scenario, right? Where the scenario is you raise fares or you cut everything.
No.
Even if we look only internally, which we absolutely need to do, right? If we say, what are all of our internal levers? There are quite a few.
Right, that's-
Beyond fare increases that are not necessarily cuts, or at least not cuts in terms of laying people off and what we are able to deliver. And so I am very open, and in fact I think it would be a really productive conversation for the board to have about, here are what I would guess is somewhere between 10 to 20 different levers, and some are going to be small, right? Some are going to be $3 million, some are going to be more significant.
For example,
I don't know, that is staff's job, and I would not,
Oh,
I
okay.
would not presume to say any of them right now.
okay.
I don't think that's an appropriate, I have my own pet peeves, but.
I want to hear pet peeves.
No, I don't
Okay.
think that's appropriate. I think it's a really inappropriate conversation for a board member to have to talk about people's jobs and
Oh,
people's
okay, no,
outcomes
no,
in
I
ways
was
that are
thinking you were something
really
else.
inappropriate.
Yeah, okay.
So I would be very open to a discussion that are big picture levers about how are we doing, how are there ways to deliver the same outcomes for less money? Are there, what are all of these options? Here's the one that I will be open to, park and ride charges.
Okay.
That is an internal lever that we could choose to push or not. It has ridership impacts, it has some other impacts, but there's your example that I
Okay.
feel okay talking about. I'm open to that discussion. I'm not open to a discussion that's like, it's this lever or it's cuts.
Oh, I didn't ask
Because
for that.
that is,
Yeah.
that's what it felt like.
Oh, sorry.
That,
Ideas, thoughts, comments.
yeah.
Okay.
And I do think, while there are boundaries for us as a board, I think more so than anything else, we have a responsibility to be good stewards of an agency that is supposed to provide a critical human service to a really broad community of people. And in that, I think sometimes there are things that are taboo for us to talk about that actually feel really important. I think executive salaries is a piece of that conversation. I think that there are other things like that internally within the agency that should not be off limits for us to discuss when we are having hard conversations about ways that we tighten the belt as an agency. And I would feel far more comfortable having conversations about fares as the last option once we've exhausted our way down a list that involves things that are more closely aligned with the first example I just gave.
Okay, there are, and I would probably interrupt if we went into one of the topics that is not appropriate or we can have, such as HR-related items, but yeah. Anything else? Okay, let's move into, because we do have some time, let's dream and other ideas. And I think that was Director Flowers had some thoughts.
Okay, yeah, sure. So again, I really just want to ground us, in my mind, conversations about revenue are actually conversations about people, especially for a public agency. And I don't think we can disentangle those two things. So in my mind, again, this budget is not just a financial decision, it's a moral, philosophical decision. We have to decide what we care about, and then we have to be willing to incur risk in order to demonstrate that that care is genuine. I think that everything that you will hear from me in the 3 to 5 minutes that I'm talking to you now, I probably can get it done quicker than that since we're pinched on time, is again rooted in this notion that culture drives politics and not vice versa. I think if we're going to be successful in securing new revenue, we have to be able to bring people along with us in that process. I think the best way to do that is to show people that we are actually willing to stick our necks out as individual board members, as executive leaders, also as an agency writ large, to protect this thing that many, many, many folks rely on in the most critical of ways. So again, I think we're facing two pinches. The first is a short-term one, right? In August of 2026, we are about to be cutting $27 million worth of service. That has cataclysmic impacts on a lot of people, even though everybody in this room has done everything humanly possible to try to mitigate the harm of those impacts to the greatest degree possible. So we appreciate that work, and that's not what is under the gun here, so to speak. I think we have to be thinking about a way to close that gap in some way, shape, or form, whether it is drawing down on our agency reserves, whether it is hacking away at wasteful spending, to some of the points that Director Kellogg's made, whether it's working with other public bodies to reallocate funds from other sources, whether we're talking PSEF or other dollars that are potentially floating around as entities go through their annual budgeting processes over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks, or whether we're talking about not just maintaining what we have, but proposing like an affirmative and aspirational vision statement of what could be possible. I think the more that we're able to deliver for people through this critical stretch of time, the better suited we will be to step into the arena of battle, so to speak, in 2027. I think that when we talk about 2027, we are talking about not just the state legislature, we're talking about multiple levels of government that we have to be working one single coordinated strategy to get aligned on and secure new revenue. The first is TriMet itself. We had an extensive conversation today about different levers that are completely under our control as an agency, whether it's exploring licensing fees on exempted entities or something else of that nature. Like, we need to figure out a way that this group of people sitting in this room can bring new dollars to this agency to stabilize what we have going on beyond just service. The second piece is cities. Like, you look at any other major transit agency in virtually any other major city in the United States of America, they are funded by a blend of options. They're not overly reliant on the state in the same way that we are. There are city dollars, there are county dollars, there are regional dollars, there are state dollars, and of course there are federal dollars. I think we need to balance out our portfolio, so to speak, and I think that that involves us having direct conversations with the cities in our service region to explore perpetual allocations to stabilize our transit system. The second piece is the counties. Of course, they have the toolkits necessary to assist us with this. I mean, you look at Sound Transit, Sam and I were talking about this the other day. A significant portion of their budget, we're talking 20, 30% of their budget is comprised by a motor vehicle excise tax. That is the exact same tool that Multnomah County is about to use to fulfill their portion of the motor center renovation. So we have these tools. We are just not using them to fund transit. That is a problem for us, and that's something that we need to be very loud about as we're having conversations with our partners at that level of government. And it can't just be Multnomah County. Like, we need to be having these conversations across the Tri-County region. This next piece is a regional solution. I think that there is, if I look at any body of elected leadership, I don't think there is anybody that is more pro-transit than Metro. Our Metro councilors are all over this issue. They want to be champions for transit, whether we're talking about, outgoing Metro president and Lynn Peterson, who's now over at City of Lake Oswego, whether we're talking incoming Metro president, likely in Juan Carlos Gonzalez, interim Metro president in Duncan Wong, whether we're talking Ashton Simpson, Christine Lewis, all those folks care deeply about transit and regional transportation and want to be able to step up to the plate and hit big for this agency. We need to be working with them to do that, and I don't think that we can approach that conversation from a survivalistic framing. We need to approach it from an aspirational framing. And then the last piece in my mind is the state. Of course, increasing the STIF is important. Of course, everything that we tried to get wrapped up in this 25 package was critical. We know that this ballot measure that goes to the ballot next week is going to fail. So we have to be thinking beyond that. And I think it's a whole lot easier for us to make an assertive argument to the state legislature if we can show them that everybody here at the local, county, and regional level is in the boat rowing in the same direction in transit. That would greatly ease the burden that we are placing on our government affairs team right now, who have really an impossible task on hand. And I think a big part of that is dispelling the notion that it is entirely the state's responsibility to get this done. That is a myth, but it is also a falsehood, right? It's not a myth that serves us well. So, all to say, as I take a couple steps back and look at this from a 30,000-foot perspective, I know in the presentation that we just had from Tara and from JC, there were a number of references to polls that have been conducted by Metro, by other partners, to bits and pieces of information that we've put out into the ethersphere. I truly do not believe that polls are accurate indicators of where everyday people are. I think that the methodology that defines polling in the modern day is really archaic. It might have been useful 20 years ago, but polls told us that Hillary Clinton was going to be president. Polls told us that Zohran Mamdani was about to get his butt kicked in the New York mayor's race. Polls told us that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was going to get washed up out of a race against the fourth-ranking Democrat in the House. She ended up beating the dude by 16 points, and he fundraised her $26 to every one. I don't think that those tools are reliable indicators of where folks are. So I think we need to modernize our approach to gathering input. And I don't think that it's just hosting a whole bunch of engagement sessions and town halls. It's hard for people to come to that type of stuff. The digital medium is one that we can more effectively leverage. And I won't just say more effectively leverage, I'll say more efficiently leverage. We spend a lot of money trying to engage community. And I say trying, it's the operative word in that sentence. I don't necessarily think we're doing the best job, not because we don't care, but because, again, we're using an outdated toolkit. I'll harken back to the example of the 2 videos I posted in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? They've done dang near, across platforms, over 300,000 views. There have been thousands of people that have engaged with them, commented, voted on, ad hoc polls that I put in there. It cost me $0.00 and cost me 3 hours of my personal time as a volunteer, right? It doesn't have to cost us a lot of money to engage a lot of people in a time-efficient way. So I think we need to take greater advantage of that medium. I had an elder in my community who said something to me the other day that really stuck, and it was that good words don't put food on the table. So as much as we'd like to communicate more effectively with people, as much as we'd like to engage people more effectively and seek input, what matters is whether or not we are able to incur risk to show up for folks in this context. And in my mind, there is no clearer example than that of that than how we approach these impending cuts in August of this year. So to the extent that we're able to have a real conversation about things we can do internally to buy ourselves another year, not just to have these large-scale conversations about the way we structurally reform our funding mechanisms, but to make sure that people are with us in that process, I think we'd be quite prudent and wise to do so. That's it for me on this end.
Thank you. Director Kellogg.
I'm going to give Gwen a chance to turn the board around after that. Just kidding. No, meaningful stuff. And I want
Yes.
to add on to it.
Yeah, we have the time. Yeah.
But, we're talking about our public perception and what people think about us and how we have functioned as an agency for, before you got here, right? Before you got here. And not just looking at the money we're bringing in terms of revenue and tax sources and value adds, but what about the money going out, right? And I'm not talking about what we spend for CapEx, that's a separate budget. I'm not talking about what we spend for people and materials and services, but no, services is what I'm talking about, right? What are the top 10 or 15 dollar amounts that we're shoveling out the door? And are those things still aligning with where we are in terms of our philosophy, our budget philosophy going forward? I assume there are several, in fact, I know there are several legacy contracts that we have that some people view as sacred cows, but we're gonna have to start looking. Now is the time to say, okay, let's get our own house in order, right? Because until we do that, we're not gonna get a whole lot of, public praise or attention from elected officials. So that's sort of an off-topic comment. I'm going to go back to the other revenue-generating ideas, and I'm going to note that it says, let's dream. So
Okay.
if this is a terribly stupid idea, don't shout me down.
Okay.
I was at the APTA conference in San Francisco, and there was a presentation by a group that had put together an app for the entire Japanese transit system. So while you're on the line buying your ticket to go to Japan and to plan your trip, here's the option: buy a transit pass, right? And we'll sell it through the airline website or whatever else. You get on to the transit, and that's where you buy your tickets for attractions, the zoo, PGE Park, the Moda Center, whatever it is. And the app, or the people who run it, take a percentage of those ticket sales, right? And so there is a revenue generation there that coincides with, you're already on the train, you already bought your pass from us, right? So now you trust this website. When you're gonna go do all these services and all these things, just use that same website, right? So again, it works in Japan. I don't know if it would work here, but I think it's probably worth exploring as an idea, especially with the way technology has improved so much that, you know, our app is already incredible, and to add those types of services to it may not be a huge lift. I don't know, I'm not in that industry, but if it brings dollars in the door as a value add, then I'm all for it.
Okay. Director Frisbee.
I struggle with dream big conversations because I have spent enough time in local government to feel an intense need to make sure that that dreaming is grounded in what we need to do and what we need to deliver to the people around us. And I think one of the things that we're not talking about in this context is timing, right? We made a really tough decision as a board, and I understand not everyone was in agreement, to cut service in order to deal with a $27 million hole this
Right.
fiscal year. Finding $27 million is not an easy thing to do in the course of a year. And, you know, I think it's an easy thing for people who are not working in local government to say, we're gonna go around and ask our partners to give us money because if they really care about us, they'll find a way to do it. The reality is, cities and counties right now are all dealing with very, not quite similar because transit has a particular structural challenge across the country right now. But particularly in Oregon, where the depreciation change has had a huge impact on our local government revenue, our cities and counties are all cutting.
Yeah.
And as much as they love transit, in the same way that we are saying, well, we could lay off X amount of more people and then spend money on this contract, they're saying, I'm supposed to give you $3 million and lay off 40 staff people? No, thank you. And I don't think that is a fair way to enter into this conversation right now, and I think it overlooks a true reality of the way that we need to work with our partners. Having said that, I do, and I pushed on this in the past, you know, I think Director Flowers highlighted that there are very different ways of funding transit across the country. Most of them actually do not rely on city and county revenue in any significant way, beyond maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. Many of them do rely on sales tax initiatives that are directed towards transit at county or city level, which is not the same thing as relying on city or county revenue. But what we see, and there's, I think, a faulty way to do that. I think we've also seen ways to do that. Sound Transit is a good example. Austin is an interesting example, where you say, look, as an agency, we can guarantee you this level of service, and that's based on your population, your density, your job centers, your demographics. You know, how likely are your citizens, are the folks who live there, your community members, how likely are they to be transit riders? You know, your ability, or, you know, maybe land use changes and zoning changes that you've set up to support transit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you want more than that level of service and that number of service hours, here's how you can pay in, and giving them an opportunity to do that. I think if we laid out a really clear approach to that, probably making Alan and Tom nervous, but sometimes that's fun for me. I think there are ways to do that and have that conversation with our partners, which make it really clear to say, you want more, we want to give you more. Here's what we need from, for you to do that. But to count on local government revenue in this fiscal year to solve our immediate crisis, to me, it overlooks the reality of what they are dealing with right now. And we just were unsuccessful in getting money from PSEF. I think part of that is that we did not mobilize people the way they need to be mobilized, and I absolutely agree with you in that space. But, when you see how often people are, it's gonna take a lot of work to get that done. So I think I'm struggling with the dream big, because to me, I want to dream big in terms of knowing what do we need to deliver, right? What do we want this agency to be, and how do we get there? And let's think ambitiously, and let's think ambitiously about that, right? If we are looking at, STIF was an incredibly ambitious undertaking. TriMet worked on that for over a decade. It represents an incredible investment in partnership. It represents incredible work. The whole low-income fair task force program was set up 2 years in advance of going down to the legislature. And part of our commitment with STIF was the low-income fair program, right? We did really smart things all in advance of getting that set up. It takes time to do good work. It takes time to build trust in community, particularly when you're bringing community along. And so I want us to, to the extent of these conversations, I'm interested in being really clear about what we need and what our timing is, and how we can bring folks along, right? I think that's part of the reason STIF was really successful, is we looked at what people needed, and two of the big asks were, we don't want particulate matter, diesel, PM 2.5 in our communities anymore, and we want a low-income fair program. And so those were part of the commitments we made as part of getting STIF. And I think there are really good questions about what are the commitments we need to make to our community, not just our riders, because we actually serve people way beyond our ridership. But I want to have this conversation in a way that is grounded in what we can expect, and that helps us understand how do we need to do the work, what are the relationships we need to build, what are the things we need to think about doing differently, what are the ways we want to use that money to deliver for the folks around us, and then how do we engage with them? Because if the answer is just, we're going to try to mobilize everyone to go yell at this thing, which isn't successful, it's not a fair use of our community members' time. It's disrespectful of their time, I think, and their energy, and you wear them out because they get tired of losing. And I'm willing, I think we need to be willing to put in the time to be strategic about using folks' passion for their transit system.
Can I just hop in?
Okay, hold on one sec.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyler. I think to respond to dreaming is a necessary part of what we do as a board. Not dreaming big pictures, but we don't have much opportunity to share our thoughts in revenue. This is the first conversation the board has been pushed to talk about revenue. And so dreaming, wish lists, what we could do, what we have done, what's not working is all part of the basket. Yep, yeah.
Sorry, I actually did not mean to suggest that that isn't something the board should do.
Yeah.
I more meant that literally it is something that I have a hard time
That's
doing.
okay, yeah,
So
yeah. No, I
think it is a
understood.
very important and worthwhile conversation for the
Right,
board.
because I know some like to dream, some, we're all different in how we approach the conversation of revenue. Before I have Director Flowers, I want to do a poll. Anyone else have comments? Because I'm going to have Director Flowers go last. Okay.
I'll just share, nothing significant. Thank you, being grounded. I took mental notes. And also that made me think of being swift in selecting a couple new revenue opportunities that can more rapidly be deployed.
Okay.
Right? In conjunction with the long-term decade-plus projects. Also revisiting Director Kellogg's comment, right? Revisiting the significant current expenditures. So on that note, I would love to ask a GM to, I think it may be in the works, but running a cost-benefit analysis of WES, what it would look like for us to provide an potential alternative bus services that would mirror the current WES service routes. And I think Kellogg has 4 more ideas for us to hear about some other time. But anyway, so thank you for all those. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kip. Yes, the board's been holding out. You have other ideas. I know what they are, but we'll address them later. But thank you. And yes, directions for the West. Okay, Director Flowers, and then we will shift our path.
Sure. So I
You
just
have
want to.
2 minutes.
Okay, copy. I want to push back on the notion that aspects of this conversation aren't grounded. And I think that it's really important for us to remind ourselves of how we landed in these seats. We didn't go out and campaign and get elected by the general public to represent them in this deliberative body with extreme agency in shaping the way our regional transit system is governed. We were appointed into these roles by our proximity to a person in a position of power. This is a governor-appointed board. I say that to remind us that our fundamental role is not necessarily to always know better than people. Our fundamental role is to listen to the people that we have been tasked with representing. I would imagine that the overwhelming majority of those people in each of our districts would agree that if push came to shove, what they would prioritize most in the next 3 months is finding a way to maintain current levels of service. I would say, I mean, that could be it could be a guess. I would say the closest thing.
Most of all things.
Of all things relative to our transit agency, if you ask those people, would you like to draw down an additional $27 million in reserves to stabilize service? Or would you like to see that service cut so that we can best position ourselves for this impending 3-year budget cliff? I would imagine that most people would say, give us another year to figure it out. I'd like to maintain my bus line. I'd like to maintain my ability to get to PSU on the max. And that could be a controversial take and controversial statement. I'm happy to make it. I just think that.
1 minute.
1 minute. It's never a waste of time for us to invite people into this space to voice their opinions. And I don't think that those opinions are useless to this body. I think that they should be directive to this body, right? Our job is not to tell folks everything that is impossible. Our job is to figure out ways to make the impossible thing possible. And I think this is something I have to live and breathe every single day. In my day job, I work for the largest community-led development in the United States of America. We take impossible tasks and turn them into possibility in very short windows of time, nonstop. It's stressful work, it's fast-paced work, it's creative work, but more so than anything else, it is listening work. And I know I need to wrap up here. I think the overwhelming feeling I'm getting from these conversations on both ends, is that in this instance, we think we know a little bit better than the people that we represent. I don't think this is as complicated as we've made it out to be. I think that we should be trying to do everything humanly possible, even if it means incurring risk as an agency to try to figure out a way to stave off cuts. And I don't think people coming in here and shouting about that is a bad thing. I think it's actually something that we should be humble enough to be able to hear and incorporate into our decision-making process. That's all I got to say.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Director Flowers. Okay, Miss Nancy, we're going to pivot to Nancy, keeping us on task. Okay. While she's getting herself together, thank you, all my colleague board members, for sharing thoughts, passion, dreams, ideas, and pushing us to listen to each other for thoughts, ideas going forward. Kind of out of words there. Okay. Nancy,
All
you're
right.
bringing to us.
I guess good afternoon now.
Yes.
right? Finally, I get to come and talk to you. Did you all receive a handout? I need to know that. Okay, great. So let's just go ahead and refer to that handout. So we're going to talk about the scorecard. So on the first one titled Budget Balancing Scorecard, 3-year plan, this is very high level, and I presented this to you previously. In the red box is the condition. We're looking for $245 million to balance the budget. We've broken that down into spending reductions, service cuts, new revenues, and some remaining gap. In the blue box, we've rolled up our sleeves and we've looked and said, so what does a spending reduction look like? What does service cuts look like? What could new revenue look like? And of course, we have that remaining gap that's going to be made up from some combination of those 3 categories. Down below in the green box, you notice that there's now some dollar amounts populated. And what we're going to do is we're going to dig into those. And I'm going to talk to you about what that is that we have actually implemented to date. So let's go to the next slide, please. First one has to do with the budget balancing scorecard spending reductions. So again, over on the left in your gold bar, you see that we're looking for 128 million from just spending reductions. And you'll notice that under the implemented, we've listed out divisional cuts. The divisional cuts are going to come to you in the May board meeting when we ask you to adopt the budget. I will first provide you a reconciliation of what those changes are so that you understand them. But it is a combination between cuts in our materials and services as well as personnel. The next line down is called vacation payout. So our general manager has the authority to start programs and end programs. And one of the programs that we have decided to cut is the vacation payout for non-union. What that means and why it results in a savings is that in a given year, you have a set salary for an individual. But when you do a vacation payout, you're taking X number of hours, 80 hours, 120 hours, and you're paying them out, which expands their salary for the year because you're giving them a payout. So we've eliminated that program. That program is about 1.7 million when you add in all of the taxes and FICA and all that good stuff. So you'll see that there's 2 million, that's 2 million a year. We're pending that or setting that program aside until things are at a different financial condition, but we feel that that is a prudent program to eliminate at that time. You'll see that there's other options there. Those other items are non-divisional specific items should they come about. Some of the things that we're just looking at and talking about as a team is, the contribution to medical and dental, contribution by TriMet from our defined contribution plan. Those are all things that we're discussing internally, and we will bring them to you as decisions are made or for those things that require a vote by our board. And then again, divisional cuts will be brought to you in the May board meeting. So let's advance to the next slide, which is our budget balancing scorecard for service. So again, your gold bar says, hey, we're looking for 27 million in savings through service cuts. And you notice we now have a green bar there that says 19 million. So that's on average. So we had planned with the current service cuts as presented to you in the April board meeting for which you approved, that we thought at the time from rolling up our sleeves, it would give us about $10 million. Well, now that those service cuts are known, we've done the service planning, we've done the scheduling, we've looked at the staffing, it's more like 11 million in savings in fiscal year 2027. Over the course of the next 15 years, it's 279 million, or on average 19 million a year. So you can see we're closing the gap on the service cuts itself. This, of course, takes into effect, those service cuts will go into effect the fall of 2026, and there'll be a different discussion at a later time of any cuts that would be implemented in the fall of 2027. Let's go to the next slide, please, on the budget balancing scorecard for revenue. As you can see at this time, we're looking for at least 45 million in new revenues. And as we have discussed with you previously, there's some hope in an increase in STIF. Looking at a fare increase, which you've discussed here this morning, that fare increase that we would look for would be in fiscal year 2029. So not a current action, but within the next 4 years. At this time, nothing has been implemented because we have nothing to set in front of you for approval. Some of the changes, as already been discussed today, would require a legislative change or further action by the board. If we can advance one, please. So now we're looking at our updated deficit. And again, for those things that we are calling implemented, because either the general manager has approved it or the board has approved it, is that looking at ending the 2026 with a $245 million deficit. We have implemented that spending reduction of $2 million and implemented into the budget these service reductions resulting in an average of $19 million a year. That decreases our deficit by $21 million, and now our $245 million deficit is $224 million. Once we bring to you the adopted budget in May, this number is going to change again, but because it is not yet adopted by the board, we cannot say that it's been implemented. Okay, advance please. I want to just talk a little bit about a couple key cost drivers for us. And of course, top of the list, as you know, is the diesel fuel prices. So as you can see, we've added a couple more weeks in there. We are slightly down from a 4-year high of $5.32 per gallon. These prices are expected to decline sharply by the end of the year. It's a good rumor. We hope it's true. Yeah. Consumption should also decrease with the service changes. And just for comparative purposes, in fiscal year 2026 in the budget, the fuel was estimated at $2.90, and that was based on the best information that we had at the time and was a reasonable price per gallon. But the current price is $4.71. So as you can imagine, because of the amount of diesel fuel we utilize, this has a significant impact, a material impact to us. And if you recall, just a couple months ago, we brought to you a budget transfer request, which you approved, which took into consideration those rising costs in fuel. Advance, please. Some of the other fiscal impacts, and I just summarized these because we did a longer presentation to you in the last board meeting. Just our increases in Lyft, it's a great problem to have. Our ridership is increasing. We're at about 268,000 rides in 2021, and we're projected to be over 1 million in fiscal year 2027. That's nearly 4 times over that time span. The unemployment rate is 5%. The core central vacancy rate is 34.6%, having a direct impact on our ridership. The area has a stalled population growth, and yet in our area, for example, PG&E has increased their rates 15.9% in 2024 and another 7.6% in 2026. Water, storm, and sewer rates have increased a total of 35% over the last 4 years. So it is very hard for us to keep pace when those types of things are increasing that we have to have in order to provide our service, and yet we have no control over those rates. Advance, please. I do want to end on a little, small positive note here, and one I want to talk about our employer payroll taxes. So I have some just very positive, hopeful news for us, and that is at the end of March, the first 9 months of the year, we're showing a stronger growth coming in at about 3.8%, where at the beginning of the year, we were determining it was only going to be around 2.5. What that means is that at the end of February, we came to you, we shared that our employer payroll taxes were almost 18 million under budget. Now we're another month, and if we had stayed on that same trajectory, we would be about 20 million under budget at this time. But we are not. So we are about 6.5 million under budget at this time. So that is a big swing that we are really pleased to see. So some of that is just a little bit of a catch-up, why those payments have come in slower. Normally what we see is that when a quarter is down, it's immediately made up in the next quarter, and that's not been our experience this year. So for whatever reason it's changing, those payments are slower. We're pleased that as of the end of March, things are looking in a better direction. I also want to just take a moment and talk about our energy tax credit sales. As you know, we generate those credits, and companies buy those. They are required to pay those taxes, and they have to have so many energy credits. Because we don't pay taxes, we get to sell those off. It is highly volatile what you can sell it at. At a low, it's $20, and lately, it's been $140 a credit, which has reaped us about $2 million more this year than what we had anticipated. I don't want you to put a pin in that $2 million. I want you to think of it as a one-time only cushion or inflow that's come in the door, but we're really pleased to see that amount. And it simply has to do with supply and demand. Now, these companies need more credits than what the sellers, like TriMet, have available to sell, so we can charge a premium. So we're really pleased with that. And then I want to refer back to something that Shelley shared earlier. So as you know, we're in the middle of the bond issuance. We've been working on this for over a year, and we are now in the frying pan, and there's a lot of activity almost on a daily basis. We've had our rating agency presentations, of which Sam was a key part of those presentations. We received the results from one of those raters, and they reaffirmed our AAA rating. So we are very, very pleased. As we go in, we're looking to go to market the first week in June. So myself and Kara Fitzpatrick, my Director of Financial Services, will be in New York for the sell. Those bonds will sell and close by the 18th of June in time for the June board meeting, when we can give you an update on the results of the sell and the potential savings from the refundings. So I'll just end on that note. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Quick question. Nancy, what was the basis for the assumption for the stiff revenue starting 28 doubling?
Starting in
I
2029.
think July 28 or
Yeah, going
whatever
into
that
there.
was.
Yeah, so looking at that and working with our public affairs folks and being realistic about when could we possibly even maybe anticipate a potential increase in the stiff. And that looks to be fiscal year 2029, being very conservative. If it happens before then, great. That really changes the trajectory. But for right now, I think being conservative, that is the safest spot that we could put it in, as fiscal 2029.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question, Nancy, about the state of our operating reserve. Where is that sitting? What is our ability to tap that reserve to address some of the issues we've been talking about today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we presented in the proposed budget, we are looking to pull from the reserves $247 million if there are no changes, okay? And if that were true, it would leave us about $81 million going into fiscal year 28. It will not be enough to get us through 2028. So with the changes to service, which were approved at the April board meeting, and with the changes in staffing and materials and services that we will bring to you in the May board meeting, we're looking to end of the year with more than 81 million, sufficient enough to get us through 2028, should there be no more changes. But what that means is going into 2029, we actually have a cliff where it is you're in crisis mode and making some decisions very, very quickly, because we will be in a position that we have to pass the budget, and resulting in some changes that maybe none of us are going to like.
Can you share that 81? I don't know if this is okay to ask. How long can we tread water? I mean, payroll, when we pull from our reserves.
So again, with the changes that we're proposing to make going into 27, that 81 million should increase quite a bit to help us get through 2028, assuming no other changes. But as you know, we will be bringing additional changes, whether it's through general administrative cuts, service cuts, increased revenues, all of those opportunities to balance the budget, to hopefully continue to move that forward. But if we don't do anything else beyond what we have brought to you today, then we will have a difficult time getting through fiscal year 2028. Yeah, meaning that we will not have a balanced budget. So we will be taking drastic cuts.
Right, so that's reasonable.
Sure, yeah, and I guess what I'm trying to do is understand if there were ever a world in which we could even, in the short term, draw down an additional $10 million in reserves, and then ask our public partners for willingness to match a commitment to try to patch a bit of a hole in this short-term gap we're facing to maintain service for another year. And I see that I'm in the minority here and thinking of that as even remotely prudent. Yeah, I don't need to reiterate everything I've been saying today, but I think my rationale is clear.
That's our cushion.
One more quick question on the energy tax credit. Is that something we can anticipate for the foreseeable future, or is there currently an end date to that market even being able to exist? Do we know?
Yes, the program is through DEQ, and as long as the DEQ supports it, we will continue to offer up and sell those credits. So it's going to be based on what we generate, and again, the supply and the demand in the market. And like I said, it is very volatile. We have been as low as, $30 a credit, and right now, we're sitting pretty at $140 a credit. So we do contract out for this negotiation, because the credits can be commingled with other opportunities that we don't have access to, and therefore further sold at a premium. So the cost for that external contractor, we get more revenue in the door when you compare to just me selling them myself. So it's definitely worth having that professional on our team. Yep.
All right, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Nancy. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Okay, changes will happen. So the time has come that Sam will talk. He's been holding his conversation very good. I could tell. There have been times when he's come to the mic and then realized, okay, this is board retreat. But I'll turn it over to you.
It's hard to listen when you want to talk. So I've been listening to everything. I do want to just, I think a conversation that came up about agencies that are implementing fare increases, and I think I wanted to give you, so just West Coast, BART, AC Transit, King County Metro, and C-Tran, and San Diego. So those are the 4 agencies on the West Coast. In the Midwest, CTA in Chicago, Metro in Chicago, Indigo in Indianapolis, and then Metro Transit in St. Paul, Minnesota. And then on the Northeast is New York, SEPTA, and then Pittsburgh also is in that conversation. I bring it up because what's going on right now is after we were all receiving this federal pandemic emergency relief funds, it's expired now, ridership has dropped, and transit agencies now are struggling because of the budget shortfalls that are there. So everybody is moving into this alignment to be able to do that. And just this past week, a colleague of mine that oversees Las Vegas transit system, they're now in front of the public, asking the public, because they got a $118 million shortfall that's taking place there. So I think when the federal aid left us, everybody went into this moment at that time. But I wanted to, I just really want to thank you for the retreat. I want to thank all of you for being here. I think the engagement was absolutely spot on. Just for me to sit back and take it in, and the insight that was provided was great. I think that there was a lot of unwavering comments and the commitment that's here with this work, and then just watching you work with one another. Really appreciate it, that looking on. I also want to thank the leadership team out here, and all of you, what you've done, and all of the staff really updated us today with that. So really wanted to take a moment to thank them as well. This work is not easy. And I was just trying to capture, as I was sitting here listening to everybody. So I've been in the industry for 35 years, and I don't think I've been at this pivotal moment that I've ever seen. I know we went through a recession back in 2006, 7, 8, all the way up to 10. but I've not seen a moment in transit, in public transit, that what we are dealing with today. So we're in this uncharted water. The financial realities are, that we're facing are complex as we move forward, and our decisions ahead will require both discipline and creativity to move forward. But really what stood out to me today is a willing from the board to engage directly with those challenges and the matters that we're dealing with. And there's a couple of things that I wrote down, a few things that came out of today is a clear understanding that our current trajectory requires action. Standing still is not an option for any of us. And then second, I heard today from Director Frisbee, I think she laid out a roadmap for us that we really need to focus on and get around, both with the short term, the mid-range, medium term, and then the long term. So we have begun to outline that path forward and what that could look like, whether we're looking at state, local, federal. We need to look at every revenue tool that's in front of us right now. And really, we need to think more broadly about how we sustain the system as we move forward. And then third, I think this is just really fire in the belly for me this is just a beginning for us. I think that we need to really continue this conversation and really fight for the people and fight for this transit system. As I stated earlier, I did not come here to reduce service at all, period. And I think all of us in the room feel the same way. So we've got to really have that passion and really fight to really make this, if we do move forward, which you've already voted on, that this is the final service cut that we're going to move forward. We're going to fight to find money and fight on the different committees that we're going to work on to frame the issues and start to align as we move forward. So the work continues is the moment, and I'll just close with this, that the decisions that are in front of us right now will not just shape this organization, but I think shape the region that we serve. And I know I sit on JPAC, and there's tons of conversations that we're having on how the jurisdictions can work together to really put a transportation system in this region that really works as we're moving forward. I believe the work that you are doing here has a real impact on access, equity, and on the economic vitality of our community as we move forward. So again, thank you for your leadership, your candor. Thanks for the commitment, as you stated, your volunteer board, the commitment to our mission that we really care about, and that's taking people opportunities to connect them with safe, convenient, reliable, accessible, and welcoming for all. So really, really appreciate that, and just appreciate you on that.
Thank you, Sam. Just a side piece on that, it's very hard to work in partnership, come together to do this kind of work in the midst of chaos. I mean, this is usually the partnership building and the work to bond with other groups and to network is done in a time when it's not crisis, but we're in the middle of a crisis. We're at the beginning of the storm. We know the storm is there. We can see the storm. And I think one of the analogies that JT mentioned earlier is this is a huge ship, and it's very hard compared to some agencies to turn it away from the storm. And so I'm glad we started the work, but we have to take extra time, extra care, and listen to form those partnerships in the midst of a storm. And in the storm, we're all emotional. We all care. We have our passions at, level 10. And then we have our daily crisis that we have no control over, like rising gas prices. And so we're facing a lot, and we're asked to do a lot in a short period of time. It would be nice to dream that this is the only service cut that we do now. That would be ideal. Let's go for the gold, and let's make this the only service cut if we can. On that note, I'm going to wrap up with 2 announcements. General Manager's evaluation time is coming. That you have? Okay. Wow. All right. And so before we were in teams, team 1 was, no, I'm just thinking, team 1 was Aaron and Robert, and you did the evaluation, and team 2 was Tyler and JT, and you did deliverables. So we will switch. So team 1, you're now team 1. Since you did the deliverables, you're going to evaluate those deliverables that you helped work on. And then Aaron and Thomas and I will still keep the same roles. I will check in with Ariana when she returns to set times. I'm on both teams to check in, because there was some conversation on process, just to check in, make sure our process is good for, public ethics and all that good stuff, but lead forward. And then I'll send out or create a 26-27 folder where all the documents, so you'll find everything. One of the things, discussions, two points. One point or discussion is I've talked with Sam with the possibility of doing a 360 this year. He has had one a couple of years ago. And so Thomas and I, Thomas doesn't know, but now he knows, will be, and along with Kim and Shelley, we'll be looking at the possibility of doing a 360. I think that would be good. And also future topics for education planning that's on our calendar. Make sure, share those. And what am I missing, Sam? Oh, I did, number 2. This is the second year that with board comments, feedback, and thoughts that we will bring to our meeting, our September meeting, that we will be freezing the GM's salary for the second year. It will be frozen. There will not be an increase. Okay.
Also, I want to say something very quickly.
Did I skip?
With that, appreciate you and the board on that. Also, I will be freezing all executive salaries for this year, so just wanted to put that out to all of you.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Lewis, for this wonderful agenda and an opportunity for our board to speak and listen. And that's something that's been refreshing for the board, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Closing comments?
Just agreed on Director Kim's, and then as far as everything we did on the board, is there a way we can get a copy of that so we can
Yes.
track it ourselves?
I think she already has a copy. She'll get it to us.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure doing this work with you.
Okay. JT? Okay. Retreat over. And look at that, 2 minutes. 1:02.